The first thing he felt was mud in his mouth, wet and cold. His face was lying right in a puddle in the middle of the village square. Someone kicked him in the side, and he rolled onto his back. People were standing over him, lots of people, and they were all laughing. Out of the corner of his eye, a translucent window flickered with letters he couldn't make out at first. Class assigned, householder, level 1. He blinked, read it again. Householder, not a knight, not a mage, not an assassin. Householder. The crowd around him roared with laughter so loudly that the headman, Morven Hale, dropped the scroll on the ground and didn't bother to pick it up. Standing nearby was a 16-year-old boy with a fiery aura around his fists. Jared Dormer, his stepbrother. His tablet glowed gold, and the letters on were visible even from 20 paces away. The Flame Knight, rank S. The crowd looked at Jared as if he were a god, and at Kai as if he were a squashed bug. His stepfather stepped right up close. A burly man with a blacksmith's hands and the red face of a drunkard. He leaned over and spat right in Kai's face. Then he said he wasn't going to feed that useless mouth. He said he enough of him eating someone else's bread. He said he could die wherever he wanted, but not under his roof. Kai wiped his face with his sleeve. His head felt empty and at the same time too full. He remembered everything. He remembered that he was 34 years old. He remembered concrete and rebar. He remembered the smell of formwork in the rain. He remembered pushing a boy out from under a falling beam and not managing to jump out of the way himself. His last thought back then had been of the gazebo he'd never finished building for his mother. And then darkness. And then mud in his mouth, and the village square, and a stranger's body. Skinny. Weak. 17 years old. Skin and bones. 3 layers of bruises on his ribs. The village headman tossed him a rusty key. The key fell into the mud next to his face. Hale said there was a hut on the edge of the wormwood forest. He said no one had returned alive from there in 40 years. He said, "Go sweep up, housekeeper." The crowd roared again. Kai picked up the key. He stood up. His legs were shaking, but they held him up. He looked at the system window. First task available. Fix the hole in the roof. Materials available. Straw, twigs, clay, deadline, sunset, reward, +3 to wall strength. And Kai smiled. That was his first mistake in front of them. Jared saw that smile, and his fiery fists clenched. His stepfather frowned. The headman stopped smiling for half a second, but then everyone decided the kid had simply lost his mind. It happens. The class of rejects is a headache. Kai turned around and walked away. No one stopped him. No one gave him any bread for the road. No one said a word except Jared, who shouted after him that he'd come back in a week to check if there was a skeleton left of him. The trail to the wormwood forest led across a field, then through a ravine, and then through a strip of trees that smelled of rot and wet wool. Kai walked and counted. It was a habit from his past life. Counting everything. Steps to the destination, time until sunset, available resources. About 40 minutes walk to the cabin. 4 hours until sunset. He'd assess the materials once he got there. A plan was already taking shape in his head, and it felt strange, because the body was foreign and weak. Yet his brain worked as always, like the brain of a man who had been building houses for 15 years. The hut emerged from behind the trees like a decayed tooth from the gums, lopsided, gray. The roof had caved in 2 places. The door hung by a single hinge. The walls were made of stone set in clay mortar. The foundation had settled on the east side. Kai stopped and looked. The system flashed. Diagnostics activated. And information unfolded before his eyes. Walls, strength, 12 out of 100. Roof, strength, 3 out of 100. Stove, strength, 8 out of 100. Draft, 15%. Heat loss, 71%. Foundation, stability, 22 out of 100. Overall status, ruin. Kai pushed the door. It creaked so loudly that he thought it would fall off along with the door frame at any moment. Inside, it smelled of mice and damp moss. In the corner lay the skeleton of some kind of dog. The roof was riddled with holes like a colander. One room, a stove against the wall, a cot made of planks, a dirt floor trampled down. Someone else in his place would have sat down and cried. Kai felt the load-bearing beam, pine. A third of it was rotten, but the core was intact. The stove, poorly mixed clay, but built properly. The foundation was stone on clay. It'll start to crumble after the third rain, but for now, it's holding up. He smirked. This isn't a hopeless project. A hopeless one is when a client says there's no budget and the deadline was yesterday. But here, there are materials, there are hands, and there's time until sunset. It's just a job. The first job for a 17-year-old foreman. Kai took off his shirt and started with the roof. First, he threw out the dog's skeleton. Then he chipped away the rotten edges of the holes. Then he climbed up the wall, clinging to the stone ledges. His body was light, the only upside to being underweight. Once at the top, he assessed the scale of the damage. 2 holes. One the size of a fist, the other the size of a wagon wheel. Rafters made of poles. 3 intact, 2 rotten. Straw around the hut grew waist-high, clay on the bank of the stream 30 paces away, willow branches by the water. He began hauling. He tied the straw into sheaves. He chopped the poles with a stone because he had no axe. He mixed the clay with his feet, adding fine gravel for strength. It was a technique from his past life. Clay mixed with gravel lasts 3 times longer than plain clay. For 2 hours he hauled, mixed, and tied. His hands were rubbed raw by the second trip. His legs were shaking by the 5th. The body of a 17-year-old boy who lived on scraps wasn't built for construction work. But the mind of a 34-year-old foreman knew how to pace himself, when to take a break, and how to breathe so he wouldn't collapse. By sunset, the roof was intact. Not pretty, not perfect, but intact. The system beeped, task completed, roof repaired, roof strength, 31 out of 100, plus 3 to wall strength, plus 1 home point. Kai went downstairs and looked at the stove. The diagnostics showed the same results as before. Clay, 40%, draft, 15%, heat loss, 71%. He sat down in front of it and began to think. In his past life, he had rebuilt stoves twice, once in an old man's house in Benda, the second time in a hunting cabin on Mount Hood. The principle is simple. Draft is the cross-sectional area of the chimney. Heat loss depends on the wall thickness and the presence of a smoke labyrinth. He dismantled the top 2 rows of masonry. The bricks were rough but even. He relaid them in a herringbone pattern. This is an 18th century technique. Bricks laid at a 45-degree angle create a pocket for hot air, and heat transfer increases by 40%. Then, he built a partition out of river clay mixed with ash. The ash makes the clay heat-resistant. The partition transformed a simple stove into something resembling a Russian one, with a labyrinth, with a bench. When he lit a fire with dry branches, the air in the hut began to warm up. An hour later, it was 18 degrees inside instead of 2. There was no smoke at all. The draft worked perfectly. The system chimed again. Plus 6 home points. Stove level 2. Unlocked. A hot dinner restores 10 HP. Kai sat by the fire and looked at his hands, smeared with blood. A boy's hands. But they'd done the job right. He found a sack in the corner of the hut, containing something that looked like grain. The system identified it. Millet. Low quality. Nutritional value, 40%. He cooked the porridge in a clay pot he found by the stove. The porridge was bland and gray, but hot. It was the first hot meal he'd had in this body in a long time. He ate and watched the fire. It had grown dark outside. The worm-eaten forest rustled beyond the wall. Something was scraping against the stones. Something was out there in the distance. But the walls held, the roof didn't leak, the stove gave off heat. Kai finished his porridge and lay down on the cot. The boards were hard, but he laid down some straw and covered himself with his shirt. A line flickered in the corner of his eye. Dormer house, level 1. Residence, 1. Durability, 31. Coziness, 4. He closed his eyes. His whole body ached. Every muscle, every joint, every worn-down finger. but for the first time since waking up in the mud, he felt something familiar. That feeling when you've finished your first day on site and are lying in the trailer, knowing that tomorrow it'll be harder, but the foundation's been laid. The foundation's been laid. The rest is just a matter of time. He fell asleep. And 3 hours later, there was a knock at the door. Quiet, faint, like the knock of someone who's afraid it will be answered and someone who's afraid it won't be answered, all at the same time. Kai opened his eyes. He stood up. He walked to the door. He opened it. Standing on the threshold was a girl of about 16, skinny, dirty, wet from the snow. A second girl was hiding behind her, younger, about 15. The older one held the younger one close with one hand and clutched a stick like a weapon with the other. Her eyes were huge and empty. That's what people look like who've walked for 2 days without sleep or food and finally made it. She opened her mouth and said they were lost. She said their village had been burned down. She said her father was gone. Kai looked at her. The system pulled up her information. Lyra Wen, 16 years old, grade unknown, hunger 89%, fear 94%, hypothermia 67%. Hana So, 15 years old, class undetermined, hunger 91%, fear 88%, hypothermia 72%. Kai silently stepped aside and opened the door wider. Then he tossed some firewood into the stove. Then he placed a pot with the remains of some porridge on the fire. Then he removed the straw from the cot, threw it on the floor by the stove, and covered it with his shirt. Lyra stood in the doorway and didn't move. She didn't believe it. Kai said the porridge would be ready in 10 minutes. He said it was warm by the stove. He told them to come in. The youngest went in first. She was shivering so hard her teeth were chattering. Kai sat her down by the fire and covered her with a second layer of straw. Lyra went in last. She was still holding the stick. Kai didn't ask her to put it down. The porridge cooked quickly. He poured it into 2 bowls. He didn't keep any for himself. The youngest ate so fast that she burned her mouth and started crying. Not from the pain, because it was hot food. The first in a long time. Lyra ate in silence. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she didn't make a sound. Kai sat by the wall and watched. The system beeped. +2 home points. Caring for the week. Multiplier 3. Total +6. Resident +1. Lyra Van. Coziness 3. Resident +1. Hana So. Coziness 5. He didn't understand why Hana's coziness score was higher. Then he realized. Hana had fallen asleep first. She curled up by the stove like a kitten and drifted off in a minute. She trusted him right away. Children trust more easily. Lyra stayed awake for another hour. She sat by the fire and watched Kai through the flames. He didn't speak. He didn't ask questions. He didn't intrude. He just sat there. Then she set her stick down on the floor. Then she lay down next to her sister. Then she fell asleep. Kai pulled the remaining straw over them. He went to the door. Snow was falling outside. The worm-eaten forest rustled and creaked. In the moonlight, a footprint was visible in the snow by the cabin window. A large one, a man's. Whoever had been standing here looking inside. The footprint led back toward the village. Kai stared at it for a long time. Then he closed the door. He propped it shut from the inside with a rock. He sat on the floor with his back to the wall next to the door, and he sat there until dawn. The morning began with Hannah stealing his last handful of grain. Kai woke up against the wall with a stiff back and saw a 15-year-old girl stuffing dry grain into her bosom. She froze when she realized he was watching. Her eyes were like those of a cornered cat, angry and frightened at the same time. Kai looked at her and said that if she ate it raw, her stomach would hurt. He said it was better to cook it. Hannah didn't answer. She was waiting for a beating. Kai could tell by the way she hunched her shoulders. He'd seen this before. In his past life, guys from orphanages worked on construction sites, and they all acted like that during the first few weeks. He stood up and walked over to the stove. He stoked the fire. He put water on to boil. He turned to face Hannah. A minute later, she quietly put the grains back into the pot. Lyra woke up from the noise. She sat up. She saw Kai by the stove. She saw that they were both alive. She saw that the hut was warm, and for the first time in 2 days, her shoulders relaxed. The tension drained from her body like air from a punctured ball. Kai cooked porridge for the 3 of them. The portions were small. There was only enough grain left for 1 more meal. That was a problem. The system displayed storage room, level 0, food supply, 2%, auto restock inactive, requires 3 residents to unlock the branch. 2, need a 3rd. But that can wait. The walls first. Kai stepped out into the yard and walked around the hut. The morning light revealed everything the darkness had hidden. The east wall had sagged by a palm's width. The south wall had a crack running from the foundation to the middle. The north wall was holding up best, but 60% of the mortar between the stones had crumbled away. The assessment confirmed it. The walls. Strength rating 12. The southern section is in critical condition. Recommendation: immediate repairs. Kai crouched down by the southern wall and ran his fingers along the crack. The stone was good. Granite from the local river. The problem is the mortar. Clay without additives dries out and crumbles. In the past, they used lime for this. There's no lime here, but there's ash from the furnace, river clay, and fine sand from the stream bank. Ash plus clay plus sand, in a ratio of 1 to 3 to 1, makes a mortar that lasts twice as long as pure clay. It's not concrete, but it'll do for masonry. He explained to Lyra that he needed help. He said they needed to gather clay from the stream and ash from the furnace. Lyra nodded and went off. No questions, without complaining. She hauled heavy clumps of clay in the hem of her skirt and didn't stop once in 2 hours. Kai watched her and thought that this girl had dragged her sister through the forest for 2 days, that her father had been eaten right before her eyes, that she hadn't broken, and that she was 16 years old. Hannah refused to help. She sat by the stove and stared with angry eyes. Kai didn't force her. He mixed the mortar and filled in the cracks. The dry stone masonry technique requires a minimum of mortar. The stones are fitted together so tightly that they hold themselves up under their own weight. The mortar only fills in the small gaps and prevents the wind from blowing through the wall. Kai removed the stones one by one. He chiseled them with another stone. He adjusted them. He put them back. He pressed the mortar into the gaps with his fingers. By noon, the south wall had stopped swaying. The system beeped. Wall, south section, strength 28 out of 100, plus 2 points for the house. His hands were elbow deep in clay, and his fingers were chafed. But Kai didn't stop. He moved on to the east wall. The problem here was more serious. Foundation settlement. The foundation was just stone on bare earth, no cushion, no drainage. The spring rains had washed away the soil, and the wall had started to shift. In a past life, he would have poured a concrete belt. There's no concrete here, but there's a principle. A buttress is needed, a stone projection on the outside of the wall that takes the lateral load. Gothic cathedrals have stood on buttresses for centuries. A hut isn't a cathedral, but the physics are the same. Kai found suitable stones by the stream. big ones, heavy ones. The body of a 17-year-old with muscular dystrophy refused to haul them. He hauled them anyway. One stone, a break, a second, a break, a third. His legs gave out and he fell to his knees. Lyra ran over and told him to stop. She said he'd kill himself. Kai replied that the wall wouldn't wait until tomorrow because if it rained at night, the eastern section would collapse. Lyra looked at him for a long time. Then she picked up a stone that came up to her knee and dragged it toward the wall. Together, they set up 3 buttresses by sunset. The system beeped. Wall, eastern section. Strength 25 out of 100. Buttress installed. Stability plus 15. Plus 3 home points. Total wall strength 24 out of 100. Wall level 2. Unlocked. The wall can withstand a blow from an adult man. Kai sat down on the ground and couldn't get up. Lyra brought him water from the stream. He drank and his hands were shaking. In the evening, he cooked porridge again. The last of it. There's no more grain. Tomorrow they'll have to look for food. There should be roots and mushrooms in the forest. Maybe berries. Maybe something else. The system offered a quest. Find a food source within a 200-meter radius. The reward? Plus 2 home points and unlocking the level 1 courtyard branch. But that's for tomorrow. Right now, it's dinner. 3 servings of porridge. Hana ate quickly and in silence. Lyra ate slowly. Kai ate what was left on the sides of the pot. The system beeped. A hot dinner for 3, plus 2 home points. Caring for the week, multiplier 3. Total, plus 6. After eating, Hana climbed onto the cot. Lyra sat by the fire. Kai was fixing the door hinge. He bent a rusty nail and hammered it into the door frame with a stone. The hinge was crooked, but the door was no longer hanging by a single fastener. Plus 1 home point. A small thing, but every point is a step forward. Lyra suddenly said he was strange. She said she'd never seen a guy who fixes the stove, cooks porridge, and repairs walls without asking any questions. Kai replied that questions could wait. He said the walls and the food couldn't wait. Lyra fell silent. Then she said their village was called Velmore, that the monsters came at night, that the barrier burst like a soap bubble because the essence in the altar had run out 3 months ago and no one had come to replenish it, that her father went out with an axe and was torn apart in a second, that her mother had died 2 years ago of a fever, that she and Hana had fled through the forest, walking for 2 days without knowing where they were going, that they'd seen smoke coming from the chimney of a hut and followed the light. Kai listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't say that everything would be all right. He knew that people who had lost everything didn't want to hear that everything would be all right. They just wanted someone to listen. When Lyra fell silent, he said one thing. He said she had a roof over her head, that the stove was working, that there would be food tomorrow. Lyra nodded. She lay down next to Hana, and for the first time in a long time, she fell asleep in less than an hour. The system flashed quietly. Lyra when. Comfort 5. Change plus 2. Hana so. Comfort 6. Change plus 1. Kai sat by the door. Outside, the wind howled. Something crackled and crunched in the forest. He thought about tomorrow. Food. That's what matters most. Without food, nothing else makes sense. Walls won't protect anyone if there's no one inside to protect. He opened the skill tree and looked at the storage branch. 3 residents are needed to activate it. He had 2, so he needed a third, or he'd have to find food himself. Before dawn, he made a mental list. The stream 30 paces away meant fish, if there were any. The surrounding forest meant roots, burdock, dandelions, nettles. Everything is edible if you know how to prepare it, he knew. In his past life, he'd gone hiking and once spent 3 days in the Cascade Mountains living on nothing but roots. When he got lost with a friend, he didn't die, so he'd manage. In the morning, he got up before dawn and headed for the stream, and that's when something he hadn't expected happened. On the 3rd day, a 3rd person arrived at the cabin, not from the forest, along the trail from the village. Kai was by the stream, pulling roots out of the mud when he heard Hana's scream. Short, sharp. He dropped everything and ran. His body wouldn't obey him and his legs tangled, but he ran. Standing at the cabin door was a girl of about 18. A knife in one hand, the other was empty. Her clothes were torn, her hair was tangled. A dark amulet dangled from a string around her neck. Hannah stood against the wall, clutching Lyra's staff to her chest. Lyra was shielding her sister with her own body. The girl with the knife didn't move. She just stood there, breathing heavily. The system popped up. May June Park, 18 years old, herbalist class, rank C, hunger 93%, fear 71%, exhaustion 85%, wound on the left shoulder, depth 2 centimeters, infection 15%. Kai stopped 5 steps away. He looked at the knife. He looked at the wound. He looked at her face. She was ready to strike, but she could barely stand. Kai turned and walked into the hut. May June flinched. She thought he'd gone to get a weapon, but he returned with a bowl. Root porridge he'd cooked that morning, gray and unappetizing but hot. He set the bowl on the ground in front of her. He sat down on a rock with his back to her, and waited. Lyra was the first to realize. She quietly led Hannah inside. May June stood with a knife over the bowl of porridge, staring at Kai's back. A minute, 2, 3. Then she sat down on the ground. She set the knife down beside her. She picked up the bowl and began to eat. Halfway through, she began to cry. Quietly, without a sound, tears dripped into the porridge. Kai didn't turn around. When she finished eating, he said, without turning around, that the wound needed to be cleaned. He said there was clean water by the stream. He said that if she didn't mind, Lyra would help bandage it. May June didn't say anything. But an hour later, she was sitting by the stove while Lyra first shoulder with a rag soaked in warm water. The system beeped. Resident +1. May June Park. Comfort 1. Residence 3. The storage room branch has been unlocked. Storage room level 1. Auto restock active. Base stock is determined by the number fed per day. Current stock, 1 sack of millet. Kai looked at the notification and couldn't believe it. He opened the pantry. In the corner of the hut, where it had been empty that morning, lay a sack of millet. Intact. Full. He touched it. Real. Hannah stared at the sack and said it hadn't been there. Kai said it was there now. And he went to cook dinner for 4. By the 5th day, the hut was no longer a ruin. The roof held up. The walls stood straight. The stove heated the hut without smoke. The pantry was restocked every morning, 1 sack of grain a day. Not much for 4 people, but enough to keep them from going hungry. Kai worked from dawn to dusk. In the morning, he patched the walls. During the day, he reinforced the foundation. In the evening, he fixed the little things, the door, the shutters, the sleeping platforms. He built 3 sleeping areas out of poles and straw. He slept on the floor by the door. For the first 2 days, May June didn't speak to anyone. She sat in a corner and stared at the wall. The wound on her shoulder was healing slowly. Kai washed it twice a day with warm water infused with nettle. May June neither thanked him nor resisted. She just sat there. On the 3rd day of her stay, she stood up. She walked over to the pot in which Kai was cooking porridge. She looked inside and said he wasn't cooking it right. She said the grains needed to be rinsed before cooking, otherwise they'd taste bitter. She said that if he added a plantain leaf, the porridge would be thicker and more filling. Kai stepped away from the pot and said, "Please." May June snorted, but she stepped up to the pot. From that moment on, the kitchen became her territory. She found wild garlic by the stream. She found burdock with fleshy roots at the edge of the forest. She found some herbs whose names Kai didn't know. The porridge stopped being gray gruel and became food. Real food. For the first time, Hannah asked for seconds. For the first time, Lyra smiled at breakfast. The system recorded every change. May June Park, coziness 3, change +2. Lyra Wen, comfort 7. Hannah So, comfort 7. Kai was beginning to understand the system better and better. Comfort isn't just a number, it's a measure of trust. The higher the comfort level, the more a person opens up, and the more the house can give in return. At the 10 mark, the first threshold opens. Something has to change. He waited. On the 6th day, Kai set to work on the yard. The area around the hut was overgrown and wild. Bushes, weeds, rocks, all jumbled together. The system offered a task: clear the yard, radius 5 meters, reward, level 1 yard, plus 2 house points. The house's radius increases by 3 meters, 5 meters. That was his system's starting radius. Anything beyond 5 meters from the walls is no longer the house's territory. There, he's just an ordinary boy, without skills, without strength, without anything. Inside the radius, he could see diagnostic data. He could see the condition of the walls, people, and objects. He could activate the functions of the stove and the pantry. He could build with bonuses from the system. Outside, nothing. The radius could only be expanded through the yard. Kai began clearing the area. He pulled up bushes. He turned over rocks. He leveled the ground. Lyra helped without being asked. She helped with everything without being asked. Silent and steadfast as a rock, Hannah sat on the roof and looked toward the forest. She loved climbing up there and watching. Her eyes were sharp. She was the first to notice everything: birds, animals, movement in the bushes. June was cooking. By the 6th day, she was already running the kitchen as if she'd lived there her whole life. Kai didn't mind. The kitchen wasn't his territory. His territory was the walls and the foundation. By the evening of the 6th day, the yard had been cleared. The system beeped. Yard level 1. House radius 8 meters. Open. Planting. Basic traps. Plus 2 house points. 8 meters. That's better. Kai looked at the cleared ground. The soil was good, dark, rich. Forest soil with humus. You can grow anything here. The system offered options: blackberries, growth time 5 days, protective function via thorns, medicinal burdock, growth time 3 days, ingredient for cooking, stinging nettles, growth time 2 days, used in cooking and as a barrier plant. Kai planted everything. The seeds came from the pantry, his first lottery prize, a packet of standard quality seeds. A small thing, but a start. On the morning of the 7th day, Kai woke up to find someone standing by the hut. They didn't knock. They didn't call out. Just standing there. He went outside. A woman was sitting against the outer wall. No, not a woman, a girl, about 19 years old, in leather armor, with a sword resting across her knees, a scar across her left eyebrow. Her eyes were closed. She was asleep, sitting, against the wall. Outside, the system popped up. Sora Kim, 19 years old, Blade class, rank B, health 43%, hunger 55%, sleep 12%, mental state, critical, guilt 91%, fear 34%, guilt 91%. Kai looked at that number and realized this girl was carrying a burden heavier than a sword. He didn't wake her up. He returned to the hut. He cooked some porridge. He carried the bowl outside. He set it down on a rock next to her. He went back inside. An hour later, the bowl was empty. Siora was sitting in the same spot, her eyes open, staring at the door. Kai came out. She said she wouldn't come in. She said she didn't need a roof over her head. She said she'd just sit by the wall and then leave. Kai nodded and said the wall was his, that she could sit by his wall. Then he left for work. He didn't ask where she was from. He didn't ask what had happened. He didn't ask about the scar or the sword. That evening, June asked him why he didn't chase away the armed stranger. Kai replied that a person who sleeps by the wall with a sword on their lap rather than inside with a sword in their hand is not a threat. That's someone who's punishing themselves. June looked at him strangely and said nothing. Siora slept by the wall for a second night, and a third. On the 4th night, it rained. Cold. Autumn. Kai went out and placed a rolled-up mat next to her. He didn't say a word. In the morning, the mat was unrolled, and Siora was sitting under it. She was still wet, but a little less so. The system flashed quietly. Siora Kim, comfort 1. Kai smirked. 1. From 0 to 1. A small step, but a step nonetheless. On the 8th day after it began, what he had both been waiting for and fearing at the same time happened. Lyra woke up in the morning and didn't scream. Every night before that, she had woken up from nightmares. Every night, Kai heard her scream in her sleep and Hannah shake her by the shoulder. That night, silence. Lyra opened her eyes. She looked at the ceiling. The ceiling was intact. No holes. She turned her head. The stove was lit. It was warm. Hannah was snoring nearby. The smell of porridge wafted from the pot. June was already at the stove. Lyra sat up and smiled. Small, timid, like the first ray of sunlight through a cloud. The system beeped. Lyra Van, coziness 10. Threshold reached. First night without a nightmare. Home bonus. The furnace unlocks the healing function at resident coziness level 25. Current progress, 10 out of 25. 10 out of 25. A long road. But Lyra's smile was worth every stone he'd hauled. Every calloused palm. Every sleepless night spent by the door. Kai looked at her and thought that in a past life his daughter would have been about the same age, if he'd had a daughter, if he hadn't spent every evening on construction sites instead of actually living. He shook his head. Not now. Work. Walls. On the 10th day, Kai completed the main project of the first week, a complete rebuild of the north wall using the dry stone masonry technique. The stones were fitted so tightly that not even a knife blade could slip into the gap. A mortar of ash, clay, and sand in every joint. 2 buttresses. The wall's thickness in critical areas was doubled by backfilling with small stones. The system clanked for a long time. Wall. Overall strength, 58 out of 100. Wall, level 3. Unlocked. The wall withstands a small caliber battering ram. Fire resistance, level 1, plus 5 home points. And a new task. The Wall of the Oath. Requirement, 3 residents with comfort 50, stone imbued with the Guardian's Oath. Reward, the wall gains active protection. Attack deflection. 3 residents with comfort 50. Lyra has 10, Hannah has 8, June has 4, So has 1. Far away, very far away. But the goal is in sight, and that's what matters. A foreman without a goal is just a guy with a hammer. A foreman with a goal is a man who will build you a house. On the 11th day, Hannah screamed from the roof. Kai ran out. Hannah was pointing toward the path leading from the village. 4 people were coming down the path, on horseback. Riding in front was a guy in red with fire on his fists. Jared Dormer. Behind him were 3 villagers, burly men, carrying torches. Kai looked at them and then at the walls. Wall level 3. Strength 58. Fire resistance, level 1. He looked at Ciora. She was already standing, sword in hand. Her eyes were cold and empty. Kai told her quietly not to kill them. He said they'd come just to scare them. Ciora didn't answer, but she lowered her sword slightly. Just a little. Jared stopped his horse 20 paces from the hut. The fire on his fists burned brightly. An S-rank flame knight. 16 years old and already stronger than any fighter in Mournhall. The 3 with him were villagers, Bart the blacksmith, Dale the herdsman, and a 3rd man Kai didn't know. All of them were holding torches. Jared looked at the hut and his face twisted. He'd expected to find a ruin, or a corpse, or both, but he found an intact roof, straight walls, and smoke coming from the chimney. Kai stood by the door, alone. Ciora stayed around the corner. Kai had asked her not to show herself unless she had to. She nodded. Jared said he'd come for what belonged to the village. He said the hut stood on communal land. He said the village head had ordered it torn down because it spoiled the view. Kai replied that the hut stood outside the village boundaries. He said that, according to Voltara's law, land outside the boundaries belonged to whoever cultivated it. He said he was the one cultivating it. Jared hadn't expected an answer. He'd expected fear. Silence. Flight. Not legal arguments from a guy he'd spat in the porridge of 3 weeks ago. The fire on his fists flared brighter. He said he didn't give a damn about the laws. He said he'd burn that shack down right now. And he hurled a fireball at the wall. The impact was powerful. The stones hummed. Heat rippled through the room. Lyra inside screamed. Hannah pressed herself against the floor. Mei Jun grabbed a knife. But the wall held. Fire resistance level 1. The stone glowed red but didn't crack. The mixture of ash and clay had fired into ceramic and only grew stronger. Kai looked at the red spot on the wall, and a notification flashed in his peripheral vision. Wall, strength 58-7, current 51, superficial damage, structural integrity maintained. Jared struck again. 2 fireballs, one at the wall, the second at the roof. The wall held once more. The roof began to smoke but didn't catch fire. The straw was wet from the morning fog, and Kai had deliberately watered it every morning just in case. The 3 villagers exchanged glances. They were expecting fireworks, to throw a torch into a dry ruin and walk away as heroes, not to stand in front of a wall that could withstand S-rank attacks. Jared struck a third time, all his strength into a single blow. The wall hummed. Durability 51-12, current 39. A crack in the top row, critical damage to the southern section. One more blow like that and the wall would collapse. Kai knew it, Jared knew it, and Seora knew it. She stepped out from around the corner, quietly, like a shadow, a sword in her hand, a scar across her eyebrow, eyes that had seen death and hadn't flinched. Jared saw her, and the flames on his fists wavered. He was S-rank, but he was a 16-year-old boy who had been assigned his rank 2 weeks ago and had never fought for real. Seora was B rank, but she killed people. Real adults with weapons and armor. The difference between an S-rank rookie and a B-rank veteran is the difference between an expensive sword and a hand that knows how to wield it. Seora didn't say a word. She simply stepped forward and struck Jared's horse's flank with the flat side of her sword. The horse reared up. Jared was thrown from the saddle and crashed into the mud. The flames on his fists went out from the impact. He lay in a puddle, staring up at the tip of the sword, a centimeter from his throat. 3 villagers dropped their torches and ran off without looking back. Seora stood over Jared and waited. Kai approached. He looked at his brother, wet, dirty, with eyes filled not with anger but with fear. Genuine, childlike fear. And Kai saw what he had seen in the diagnostic scan. Jared Dormer, 16 years old. Flame Knight S. Health, 95%. Hunger, 5%. Fear, 78%. And one more line he hadn't expected. Loneliness, 64%. 64% loneliness in the village's golden boy. An S rank. The one everyone adores. Kai looked at that number and paused for a second. Then he turned away. He told Seor that was enough. She sheathed her sword. Jared jumped up and backed away. And just then, Hannah darted out from behind the door. Small, quick, a 15-year-old thorn in the side. She darted past Jared. He didn't realize what had happened. But Hannah was already standing 10 paces away, holding his belt. The belt from which hung his scabbard, his wallet, and his pants. Jared's pants fell off. He stood in the middle of the courtyard in his underwear, wet, dirty, unarmed, without pants, in front of the girl who was sticking her tongue out at him. Mei Jun stepped out onto the porch and burst out laughing, for the first time ever, loudly and from the heart. Lyra covered her mouth with her hand, but her shoulders were shaking. Even Seora curled her lips into something vaguely resembling a smile. Jared stood as red as his former fire and couldn't move for shame. Kai told Hannah to give the belt back. Hannah said she'd give it back when he said please. Kai said, Hannah. She pouted and threw the belt into the mud. Jared grabbed it and ran, without a horse. The horse had run off into the woods. He ran along the trail toward the village, and Kai knew that by evening all of Mournhall would know how the householder's younger brother had run away without his pants after being chased by a 15-year-old girl. The system beeped. The wall had withstood the attack. House reputation plus 15. Plus 3 house points for protecting the residents. Kai turned to Seora. She was already heading back around the corner, to her spot by the wall. He thanked her. She didn't reply. But that evening, when Mei Jun brought her a bowl, Seora nodded in thanks for the first time. Seora's comfort. 2. That evening, Kai inspected the damage. The south wall had cracked in 2 places. The top row of bricks had shifted. The fire had burned away the mortar over a section 1.5 meters long. The structural integrity had dropped to 39. It needed to be repaired. Tomorrow. Today he was so tired he couldn't even lift his arms. He sat down by the stove. The four of them gathered around the fire: Lyra, Hannah, May June, and him. Ciora was outside but still within the house's radius. 5 of them. Hannah recounted how Jared had run off without his pants on and laughed so hard she was hiccuping. May June added details that weren't true but made the story better. Lyra laughed quietly. Kai listened and thought. He thought about how, 30 days ago, he had died at a construction site in Portland. That right now he was sitting in a cabin in a world that shouldn't exist, listening to 3 girls he'd known for less than 2 weeks laugh by his stove. And that this was the best evening of both his lives. Then he got up and went to fix the door bolt. He needed a proper latch. Not a rock propping up the door, but a real bolt, made of wood, with a groove. He found a suitable branch. He whittled it down with May June's knife. He carved a groove into the door frame. He inserted it. He tested it. It holds. Not perfect, but better than a rock. Plus 1 point for the house. Kai looked at the total score. 47 points for the house. House level 3. For residents plus 1 behind the wall. Coziness, 5.2. Radius, 8 meters. Wall, level 3. Stove, level 2. Pantry, level 1. Yard, level 1. Hearth, level 1. Not enough. But 2 weeks ago, this was a ruin with a hole in the roof and a dog skeleton in the corner. Progress isn't about speed. Progress is about direction. The direction is right. That night, Kai sat by the door again. He was thinking. In 18 days, the collector Cassius Wayne would arrive. 18 days to transform the hut from a structure that could barely hold a single boy into a structure that can withstand an imperial official with an escort. 18 days to find a legal basis for its existence. 18 days to gather enough comfort from the residents to unlock new features. He needs the Wall of Oaths. He needs a healing furnace. He needs a storage room, at least a 3rd level one. He needs a courtyard with traps. And he needs people. More people. Because the system depends on people. Without them, he'll remain just a guy with strong walls and an empty house. He closed his eyes and remembered how, in his past life, he'd managed 3 projects at once. A house in Beaverton, an addition in Tigard, and an office renovation in downtown Portland. 3 sites, different crews, different deadlines, different problems. He managed it back then. He'll manage it now. The only difference was that back then, it was the client's money at stake. Now, it was the lives of the people sleeping by his stove. On the 13th day after the start, Lyra reached comfort level 12 and spoke of her mother for the first time. It happened in the evening after dinner. May June had cooked a stew made from roots and wild garlic, and Hannah ate 3 servings. Everyone was sitting by the fire. For the first time, Ciora was sitting not behind the wall, but by the door, inside the threshold. Not completely inside, but no longer outside. Progress. Lyra was staring at the fire when she suddenly said that her mother used to make a similar soup. She said her mother had a special recipe with honey and cinnamon. She said her mother had died of a fever 2 years ago, and that her father had stopped smiling ever since. Then she fell silent. Kai didn't try to comfort her. He didn't say that everything would be all right. He said that May June's soup was good too. Lyra nodded. And she said one more thing. She said her mother's maiden name wasn't So. That her mother had taken the surname So after marriage, but before that, her surname had been Wen. Wen. Kai looked up. The system flashed. Hidden information. Wen. A junior branch of House Wayne. A connection to the Imperial clan. Confirmation requires comfort 25. Wen. Wayne. The similarity isn't a coincidence. Lyra continued. She said her mother never spoke about her family. She said that once she found a locket with a coat of arms that her mother had hidden and told her to forget about. She said the coat of arms was the same as the one on the flags of the Imperial collectors. Then she got scared she'd said too much and fell silent. Kai replied that no one here betrays anyone. He said her secret was safe. Lyra looked at him. Her eyes were wet. She nodded. The system updated silently. Lyra Ven. Comfort 13. Hidden card. Progress. 13 of 25. Kai thought, if Lyra is connected to House Vane, then Cassius's arrival isn't just an inspection. It's a potential trump card, or a landmine. A family connection between the refugee in his hut and the Imperial collector could turn everything upside down. But it was too early to tell. He needed more information. He needed Cozy 25. He pushed the thought aside and returned to work. He spent the next 4 days working on the wall. The southern section had been damaged by Jared's blows and required a complete rebuild. Kai dismantled the damaged section down to the foundation. He inspected and sorted every stone, the intact ones into one pile, the cracked ones into another. The cracked ones would be used for the inner layer's backfill, the intact ones for the outer layer. He worked methodically and precisely, just as he had worked in his past life on construction sites where a mistake cost money, but here it cost lives. Lyra hauled clay. Mei-jun found a special blue clay by the stream which, according to the system, had increased heat resistance. Kai mixed it with the regular clay in a ratio of 1:5 and obtained a mortar with twice the fire resistance of the previous one. Hannah sat on the roof and kept watch. That had become her job. She could see everything within a kilometer and warned of any movement. Twice over the past few days, she had spotted wolves at the edge of the forest. Once, a group of 3 people on the road. The people walked past. So did the wolves. Siora stood by the wall, sharpening her sword. She still wouldn't go inside. But now she was talking. In monosyllables. Yes. No. Maybe. Once she said the wall was well built. Kai took that as the highest praise from someone who had seen fortresses and castles. By the 17th day, the southern wall was ready. Double masonry. The outer layer was made of large stones. The inner layer was made of rubble and blue clay. Between the layers was an air gap for thermal insulation. Kai had applied a principle from modern construction. A double wall with an air gap retains heat 3 times better than a single wall and withstands impact just as well. The system emitted a long, ringing sound. Wall. Overall strength, 74 out of 100. Wall level 4. Fire resistance, level 2. Unlocked. The wall can withstand an impact from a medium caliber siege ram. Thermal protection. The internal temperature remains stable when the external temperature ranges from -20 to +40. +8. House points. New task. Reinforce the foundation to level 3. Requirements. 200 units of river stone, 50 units of high-quality mortar. Reward. Level 3 foundation. Total durability +20. 200 stones. Kai looked at the stream. There were plenty of stones there, but hauling them all by himself would take a healthy man a week's worth of work. Not for a 17-year-old skeleton. But there was no other option. He started hauling them. That same day, Kai tried for the first time to talk to Mei-jun about her past. Not out of curiosity. The system showed that her comfort level was stuck at 6 and hadn't risen for 3 days. Something was blocking it. Kai approached her as she was washing pots by the stream. He said he saw her amulet around her neck every day. He said he'd seen similar symbols on the slabs along the road to the village. Mei-jun froze. Then she slowly hid the amulet under her shirt. She said it was from her father. She said her father had been a healer. She said he'd been hanged. And she fell silent. Kai didn't press her. He said that when she was ready to talk, he'd listen. And he left. Mei-jun stood by the stream and watched his back. Then she quietly called after him, saying he was strange. That normal people are afraid when they see the synod symbol. Kai stopped. The synod symbol. Mei-jun's amulet was the synod symbol. He turned around. He asked what the synod was. Mei-jun looked at him for a long time. Then she said that he really didn't know. She said that the synod was a shadow church, that they kept tabs on the classes, that they decided who lived and who died, that her father had treated one of them and found out too much, that he was hanged not for taxes but for what he knew. Kai asked what he knew. Mei-jun shook her head. She said she couldn't tell him yet. She said someday. The system flashed. Mei-jun Park. Comfort 8. Change +2. 8. Growth has begun. Trust comes not from questions but from patience. On the 18th day, Kai was working by the stream. He was hauling rocks for the foundation. The 18th rock of the day. His hands were numb. His back was on fire. His body was giving out, but he kept hauling. And then a person appeared on the trail. Not from the forest, not from the village, from the main road. A girl, about 17 years old, in a dress that had once cost more than all of Mornhall. Now it was torn and dirty, but the fabric was silk and the cut was aristocratic. She was walking barefoot. Her feet were covered in blood. In one hand she clutched a piece of paper. The other was empty. She saw K and stopped. The system popped up. Penelope Ashton, 17 years old. Accounting class. Rank D. Hunger, 76%. Fear, 82%. Exhaustion, 69%. Dehydration, 45%. Injuries, multiple abrasions on the soles of her feet. A deep cut on her right palm. Kai looked at her. She looked at him and said she needed water. Her voice was hoarse, but with an intonation that only an aristocratic upbringing could impart. Even as she was dying of thirst, she sounded like someone accustomed to being listened to. Kai brought her water from the stream. She drank for a long time. Then she sat down on a rock and looked at the hut. She looked at the walls, at the roof, at the smoke coming from the chimney, and she said it was the ugliest building she'd ever seen in her life. Kai replied that she could move on if she didn't like it. Penny, that's what she asked to be called. Penny looked at the road behind her, then at the cabin, then at Kai, and she said she thought she'd stay for one night. She didn't stay just one night. Kai led her inside. June gave her a bowl of soup. Lyra washed her feet. Hannah stared at the silk dress with an expression as if she'd seen a talking cow. Penny ate in silence. Then she surveyed the cabin with the same expression Kai had seen on the faces of inspectors in a past life. Critical, assessing, professional. She asked where the records were. Kai didn't understand. Penny repeated herself. Records, logs, incoming and outgoing, who eats what, how much grain is in the pantry, how much firewood is used per day, how many people there are, and how many days the supplies will last. Kai said it was all in his head. Penny said that keeping records in your head was a sure path to bankruptcy and starvation. She said she was an accountant, rank D, trash class, but she was the daughter of a merchant baron and could do math better than any mage in this backwater. She said that if he gave her some charcoal and a plank, by morning she'd show him where he is losing resources. Kai gave her coal and a board. By morning, Penny had done what in her past life was called an audit. 12 lines. Grain intake, grain output, firewood consumption, water intake, daily consumption per person, 10-day forecast, points of loss. She found 3. The stove was losing 20% of its heat through a crack in the chimney that Kai hadn't noticed. The pantry wasn't storing the grain properly, and 15% was spoiling due to dampness. Water from the stream was being used inefficiently because no one carried more than one pot at a time. Kai looked at those 12 lines, and, for the first time in both lives, he felt what a foreman feels when a competent project manager arrives at his site. Relief. He told Penny that she was staying. Penny said she hadn't decided yet, but she stayed. The system beeped. Resident +1, Penelope Ashton. Coziness 2, Residence 5. Storage level 2, auto restock plus 20%. New bonus, storage lottery active. Next drawing in 24 hours. 5 residents, Lyra, Hannah, June, Sora, Penny. 5 people under his roof, or near it, in Sora's case. And there are 12 days left until the collector arrives. Kai looked at the to-do list he was keeping in his head. Foundation, need to lay more stones. Wall, need to reach level 5 before Cassius arrives. Furnace, need to seal the crack in the chimney. Storage room, I need a 3rd shelf for proper storage. The yard, I need to expand it to 12 meters and set up traps. And most importantly, the documents. Penny mentioned that the papers left in the cabin by the previous owner might include land deeds. If the land legally belongs to an individual rather than the community, then Kai can claim estate status. And an estate isn't just a shack that can be torn down. It's a legal entity with rights, with protection, with the ability to pay taxes directly, bypassing the village head. Kai reached under the bed. There, in the cracks between the foundation stones, lay a bundle. Old, covered in mold. He pulled it out and unwrapped it. Inside were papers. Yellowed, fragile. The letters were faded, but legible. Penny took them and began to sort through them. An hour later, she looked up. Her eyes were ablaze. She said it was a land deed, that the land on which the hut stood and the 200 steps around it belonged to the Dormer family. Not the community, not the village, the Dormer family. The deed had been signed 40 years ago by Kai's mother, the very one who had died when he was a child, the very one his stepfather had forbidden him to speak of. Kai held in his hands the paper his mother had signed 40 years ago and thought about the woman he'd never known, the one who owned this land, the one who, for some reason, hadn't sold it or given it up. Even when she married a drunken blacksmith in Mournhall, she'd kept this land for him. Penny said there was something else. She said that among the papers, they'd found records of Mournhall's tax payments for the past 20 years. Copies. Kai's mother kept copies. And the figures in those copies don't match what village head Hale sent to the imperial tax collectors. A difference of 40%. 40%. Village head Morvin Hale had been stealing nearly half the taxes for 20 years. He falsified reports. He sold people into the wagon train for silver and them off as volunteers. And he pocketed the difference. Kai looked at those numbers. Then he looked at Penny. Penny was smiling. Not a kind smile. A sharp one. Professional. The smile of a trading baron's daughter who sees numbers the way others see faces. She said that if they showed this to the collector, Hale would be sent to the front instead of Kai. Kai said it was a trump card. But it had to be played at the right moment. Not now. In 12 days. When Cassius Wayne sits down at his desk. The system beeped. Storage level 3. Auto restock plus 30%. The trade branch is open. Trade with the outside world is available if a trade route exists. Progress. Penny said the trade route was a 2-hour walk from the cabin. She said she knew because her family owned it, or rather, had owned it until they went bankrupt. But she still had the documents for the route, in that very piece of paper she was clutching in her hand when she arrived. Kai looked at her. Penny looked at him, and for the first time ever, her face wasn't haughty or frightened, but calm. She said she needed a place to stay. She said her father had sold her like a promissory note to a 60-year-old creditor. She said she'd run away in the clothes she was wearing, walked for 3 days, and came here because she saw smoke. Kai nodded. He said there was a place for her. He said there was plenty of work. Penny snorted and said she wasn't his maid. Mei Jun called out from the kitchen that if that was the case, she should go chop onions. Penny opened her mouth to reply. She closed her mouth. She grabbed a knife and went to chop onions. Hannah giggled. Penny turned around and said that if anyone said a single word, she'd leave. No one said anything, but everyone was smiling. That evening, Kai sat in the yard and looked at the cabin. 5 windows glowed with warm light. Smoke curled from the chimney. Voices could be heard from behind the door. Lyra and Penny were arguing about the right way to fold laundry. Mei Jun was clattering pots and pans. Hannah was telling Sora at the door about how Jared ran off without his pants on, and Sora didn't answer, but didn't walk away either. Kai looked at all this, and a thought from a past life flashed through his mind. He had been building houses for 15 years, hundreds of projects, but this was the first one he was building not for a client, but for the people who would live in it. And the difference between those two things was the difference between work and life. The system flashed quietly in the corner of his vision. Dormer house, level 4, residence, 5, house points, 73, durability, 74, comfort, average, 6.2, status, fortified hut, 12 days until Cassius Wayne's arrival. To reach level 5 of the wall, 20 points and a complete foundation overhaul are needed. To reach level 3 of the stove, resident comfort of 25 is needed. To reach level 4 of the pantry, 10 residents are needed. Kai closed his eyes. 12 days, 20 points, 200 stones for the foundation, documents for the legal battle, a warm dinner every evening, and not a single day without work. He got up and went to haul stones. 12 days. Kai repeated that number every morning when he opened his eyes. 12 days until Cassius Wayne's arrival. 12 days to turn the fortified hut into something an imperial official couldn't simply tear down. On the 19th day, Kai went out into the yard before dawn and began hauling stones. The foundation required 200 river stones. He had hauled 82 over the past few days. 118 remained. His body ached so much that he could no longer distinguish the individual sources of pain. His back, his arms, his knees, everything had merged into a single, throbbing mass. But he kept hauling, stone after stone. A break, a stone, a break. At dawn, Siora approached him. Silently, she picked up a stone that Kai couldn't lift on his own. She carried it to the hut. Kai looked at her. She didn't turn around. She brought the stone. She returned. She picked up the next one. They worked together until noon. 40 stones. Siora was strong. Her B-rank blade class granted not only in combat but also in physical strength. She carried stones that Kai could only drag along the ground. After noon, Kai sat down on the ground and couldn't get up. His legs gave out. They simply stopped obeying him. Mei Jun came out of the hut and saw him sitting in the mud. She walked over. She looked at his hands. His palms were scraped down to the flesh. His fingers were swollen. 3 of his fingernails had turned black. She told him he was an idiot. She said that if he died of exhaustion, who would repair the walls? She told him to go eat. Kai replied that there were still 78 stones left. Mei-jun crouched down beside him and looked him in the eyes. She said quietly that he wasn't on a construction site, that there was no client here demanding he meet deadlines, that there were people here who needed him alive, not as a corpse by the stream. Kai fell silent. She was right, and he knew it. In his past life, he'd pushed himself just like this. He'd work 16 hours straight. He wouldn't eat. He wouldn't sleep, until he collapsed. And then he'd get up and keep going. Mei-jun helped him up. She led him inside. She set a bowl of soup in front of him. He ate, and his hands shook so badly that the spoon clattered against the clay. Mei-jun sat across from him and watched. Then she said his palms needed to be bandaged. She took a bundle of dried herbs out of her bag. She soaked them in warm water, applied them to the wounds, and bandaged them with strips of cloth. The burning in his hands stopped immediately. The system flashed. Herbal compress, average quality, regeneration +5 per hour, duration 8 hours, class C-rank herbalist, trash by world standards. But Mei-jun knew herbs as well as Kai knew stones. She asked where he'd learned to build. Kai answered without hesitation. He said his father had taught him. A lie, but closer to the truth than he could allow. Mei-jun nodded. She didn't believe him, but she didn't press the issue. Mei-jun 9th, +1, 9, close to the first threshold. That evening, Kai repaired the chimney. The gap Penny had found turned out to be a crack in the upper segment. He climbed onto the roof and patched it with a mixture of blue clay. Heat loss decreased by 20%. The stove began to heat more evenly. Firewood consumption dropped by 1/4. Penny recalculated and updated her records on the board. She kept track of every grain, every twig, every pot of water. On the 20th day, Penny presented Kai with a full report. 18 days worth of food at the current rate of consumption, 12 days worth of firewood, an unlimited supply of water, enough stone for construction within a 50-meter radius. The main problem was protein. Grains and roots provided carbohydrates, but without meat, fish, or beans, their bodies were growing weaker. Kai could already feel it. His muscles were recovering more slowly with each passing day. Lyra was losing weight. Hannah looked pale. They needed protein. Kai went to the stream. Fish. He saw a glimpse of silvery bodies in the water. Trout or something like that, but he had nothing to catch them with. No hooks, no fishing line, no nets. In his past life, he'd caught fish with his bare hands on the Mackenzie River. Just once, on a dare. He caught one in 2 hours. Here, he needed a more effective method. He recalled the techniques of the indigenous peoples. A weir, a narrow stone corridor that guides the fish into a trap. He'd built something similar for a client in Oregon, a decorative pond with a stone watercourse. The principle was the same. Kai spent a day building the weir. He laid stones across the stream. He left a narrow passage. At the end of the passage, he placed a basket woven from willow twigs. The fish swim downstream. They enter the corridor. They end up in the basket. They can't turn around. By evening, there were 3 fish in the basket, not trout. The system identified them as river perch, small ones, but they were white fish. Mei-jun took the fish and did something incredible with them. She gutted it, rubbed it with wild garlic and some kind of herb that made the hut smell so strong that Hannah came running down from the roof. She baked it over coals in a clay coating. Fish in clay. Kai had eaten this in a past life in Brazil at a builders' conference. Here, it tasted better, because here, he was hungrier. 6 people ate the fish with the roots and remained silent, not because there was nothing to say, because when food is real and hot and delicious, words are superfluous. Hannah ate her portion and stared at Kai's portion. Kai cut his piece in half and offered it to her. Hannah took it. She looked at him, and for the first time she didn't call him uncle. She called him by his name, quietly, almost in a whisper. Kai. The system beeped. Hannah So, comfort level 10, threshold reached. Hannah stopped hiding the bread. The first threshold, 10. Kai remembered that at 10, people stop being afraid. Hannah stopped hiding food in her bosom. 3 days ago, he'd seen her stuff a crust into her pocket. Now she'd stopped.
because she believed there would be food tomorrow too. It's such a simple thing, knowing that you'll be fed tomorrow too, and yet so immense when he hadn't known it for a year. That night, Kai lay on the floor and counted the days. The 20th day. 10 days until Cassia. A wall with a strength of 74. He needs 85 for the 5th level. The foundation has 122 stones out of 200. The storage room is at level 3. He needs level 4, but that requires 10 residents, and he only has 5. The documents are ready. Penny organized the accounting into neat spreadsheets. The land deed is notarized. The evidence of Hale's theft is sorted by year. Legally, he's ready. Physically, it's not enough. Kai closed his eyes and saw the blueprint in the darkness, as always.
In his past life, he'd fall asleep with blueprints under his eyelids. Here, too. Only the blueprints were different. Not a $400,000 house for a client. A house for 5 girls who had nothing else. On the 21st day, something happened that Kai hadn't planned for. People came to the cabin. Not a single runaway with a knife. Not a girl in tattered silk. A group. 8 people. 3 families from the village of Crossfield, a 2-day journey away. An old man with his wife. A woman with 2 children. A man with his daughter and nephew. All hungry. All frightened. All with the same story. Kai kicked down the barrier had failed. The monsters had come. The knights hadn't come. They'd heard that at the edge of the wormwood forest there was a hut where they served food. Kai stood in the doorway and looked at the 8 pairs of eyes. The system was running diagnostics on each of them. Hunger levels ranged from 70 to 95%. Fear levels ranged from 60 to 90. One of the children had a fever. The old man had broken ribs. The woman had a burn on her arm. 8 people. He had enough food in the pantry for 6. The stove could cook 6 servings at a time. There were 5 cots. The cabin could barely fit 5 people. Kai looked at Mei Jun. She was already standing by the pot. He looked at Penny. Penny was doing the math in her head. He looked at Lyra. Lyra was already spreading straw on the floor for the children. He turned to the refugees and said, "Come on in." The system beeped. Residents, +8. Total, 13. Pantry level 3. Auto restock recalculated. Stock increased. Pantry lottery. Next drawing. Bonus for 10 or more residents. Chance of a rare ingredient, 15%. Kai was cooking porridge. 1 pot, then a second, then a third. Mei Jun chopped the roots and tossed them into the boiling water. Lyra ladled it into bowls. Hannah carried water from the stream. Penny counted out the portions. 13 people. 13 bowls. The porridge was runny, not as thick as usual, but hot, and a full bowl for everyone. Kai didn't take his. He gave it to the old man with the broken ribs. Mei Jun saw this and silently divided her portion in 2. She gave half to Kai. He looked at her. She said that if he collapsed from hunger, who would fix the eastern buttress that was swaying? Kai took the bowl. The system beeped softly. Caring for the weak. Multiplier 3. Number fed, 13, plus 24 home points. Mei Jun Park. Coziness 10. Threshold reached. 24 points for a single dinner, more than in the first 5 days together. And Mei Jun is at 10. The first threshold. She stopped snapping back. Not completely, but the anger had left her voice. The sharpness remained, professional, not defensive. She began to take charge in the kitchen, not because she was defending her territory, but because she knew how to do it better than anyone else. At night, the hut was cramped. 13 people in one room, children on cots, adults on the floor, the old man by the stove. Kai was by the door. Siora was outside. It was cramped and noisy, and it smelled of people, wet clothes, and porridge. Kai lay there and thought that this was the most crowded hut he'd ever been in, and that the walls were holding up, and the roof doesn't leak, and the stove keeps all 13 of them warm, and that tomorrow morning the pantry will be restocked and he'll cook up another pot, and another, as many as needed. The system flashed. The pantry lottery. Result: a bag of salt. High quality salt. When Mei Jun found out that morning, she made a face that Kai would remember forever. She looked at the bag of salt the way other women look at diamonds. Salt is flavor. Salt is preservation. Salt is health. With salt, Porridge ceased to be mere boiled grain and became food, real food. On the 23rd day, Kai finished the foundation. 200 stones, each carried by hand, each laid using a technique that doesn't exist in this world. A cushion of compacted gravel under each block, a drainage channel along the perimeter to divert water. Kai dug it with a shovel he'd made himself from a flat stone and a stick. In his past life, the crew would have laughed at him for such a shovel. Here, it was his #1 tool. The system beeped. Foundation level 3, total strength plus 20, wall. Overall strength 88 out of 100. Wall level 5. Unlocked. The wall can withstand 12 hits from heavy cavalry. Fire resistance. Level 2. House. Level 5. Status. Fortified hut. Upgrades to mini fortress status upon reaching 3 residents with comfort 50. Level 5 wall. 88 durability. Withstands 12 strikes from heavy cavalry. Kai stood and looked at his walls. At the even rows of stone. At the buttresses, at the double masonry of the southern section, with an air gap. 23 days ago, this had been a ruin. Now, standing here was something that in his past world would have been called a small fortress. Not beautiful, not elegant, but sturdy, like everything he built. 7 days until Kasha. Kai turned his attention to the courtyard. The blackberries he planted on the 6th day had grown into a wall. Literally a wall. The system had accelerated their growth through the courtyard branch. Prickly vines twice a man's height entwined the perimeter from the gate to the eastern corner. Thorns as long as a finger, hard as nails. Anyone who tried to climb over would leave pieces of skin and clothing behind. Level 2 of the courtyard had activated the traps. Basic ones. A pit with stakes. A taut rope with a weight. Snare traps. Kai set 3 pits in front of the main approach. He camouflaged them with branches and foliage. He stretched a taut rope between the gate and the corner. He placed snare traps along the back wall in case of a flanking maneuver. Not lethal traps, just delaying ones. Trips, time wasters, because time is the main resource of defense. Every second the enemy spends on a trap is a second Siora spends preparing. Siora. She finally went inside. On the 22nd day, it was raining, cold, icy, an autumn downpour that penetrated to the bone. Kai opened the door and said there was a place by the fire inside. Siora stood in the rain with her sword resting on her knees. Water ran down the scar across her eyebrow. She was silent. Kai didn't leave. He stood in the doorway, getting wet along with her. A minute, 2, 5. Mei-jun shouted from behind them that they were both idiots and should come inside before they drowned. Siora stood up. She went inside. Her first step across the threshold. The system beeped. Siora Kim, Comfort 4, Change +3. Inside the house for the first time. She sat by the door, not by the fire, by the door, with the sword on her lap, but inside. Hannah brought her a bowl of porridge. Siora took it, nodded, ate in silence. Kai sat by the stove and didn't look at her. He didn't want to pressure her. Entering the house isn't just a matter of stepping over the threshold. For a person who considers himself a monster, it's an admission that he deserves a roof over his head. Siora didn't think so yet, but she came in, and that meant more than all the stones he'd laid in the foundation. On the 25th day, Kai did something that changed everything. He cooked a single pot of soup for everyone, 13 residents, plus Siora, 14, 1 pot. Mei-jun said it was impossible. She said the pot was for 8 servings. She said the math wouldn't work. Kai said the math would work if you knew the recipe. In a past life, he'd cooked chili for a crew of 20 people in a pot the same size as this one. The secret isn't in the amount of meat. The secret is in the broth. The bones. Kai caught some fish in the pond, 8 perch. He filleted them. He threw the bones and heads into a pot of water and simmered them over low heat starting in the morning. By noon, the broth was thick and rich. He added root vegetables, burdock, wild carrots that Mei-jun had found on the southern slope, stinging nettles, and wild garlic, salt. The fish fillets, cut into small pieces so there would be enough for everyone, grains to thicken it. The soup simmered for 4 hours. The smell filled the hut so strongly that the refugee children sat by the pot, swallowing their saliva. In the evening, Kai served the soup, 14 bowls, each one full. A thick, golden broth with pieces of fish and roots, hot, salty, real. He handed out the bowls and watched as people ate. The old man with broken ribs ate slowly, and for the first time in days, his hands didn't tremble. The woman with a burn fed her 2 children one at a time with a single spoon. A man from K. Ross Field ate standing against the wall, staring at the ceiling, his lips moving as if he were praying. A girl of about 8, the man's daughter. She was eating and crying, quietly, silently. Tears dripped into her soup. Kai walked over to her. He sat down next to her. She looked at him with tear-filled eyes and said the soup was delicious. She said she'd forgotten that anything could taste so good. Kai stroked her head. He didn't say anything. Words would have been superfluous. Across the table, Mei Jun watched the scene. At his hand resting on the crying girl's head. At his face, which was calm, warm, and mature. Not the face of a 17-year-old boy, but the face of a man who understands another's pain and doesn't look away. Mei Jun set her bowl down on the table and walked out the door. Kai heard her and followed her out. She was standing by the wall, looking out into the dark forest. He approached her. Without turning around, she said that he wasn't who he claimed to be. She said that 17-year-old boys don't look at children that way. They don't cook soup that way. They don't stack stones that way. Kai remained silent. Mei Jun turned to face him. Her eyes were wet. She said she didn't care who he was. She said her father had been just like that. Quiet, calm. He helped people and asked for nothing in return. They hanged him for it. Kai said they wouldn't hang him. Mei Jun snorted through her tears and said he couldn't promise that. Kai said he could, because his balls were stronger than a rope. Mei Jun looked at him, and for the first time ever, she smiled at him. She didn't snort. She didn't grimace. She smiled. A small, bitter smile that was worth more than all of his 88 strength points. The system beeped. Mei Jun Park, coziness 22, change plus 12, caring for the weak, multiplier 3, dinner at 14, plus 32 home points. 22. A jump from 10 to 22 in a single evening. Because Mei Jun didn't see walls or soup. She saw a person. And 32 home points for a single dinner. The total score had surpassed 130. Lyra sat next to the children all evening, telling them something in a quiet voice. Hannah climbed onto the roof and kept watch. Penny was taking inventory. Siora stood by the door, gazing into the darkness. A typical evening at the Dormer house. 14 people under one roof. Crowded, noisy, warm. On the 26th day, Mei Jun showed Kai the diary. She approached him in the morning as he was finishing the last seam in the masonry. She pulled a bundle from her bosom. Leather, old, tied with a rope. She placed it on a stone in front of him. Kai unwrapped it. Inside was a notebook. The pages were yellowed and brittle. The text was small. The handwriting was neat, the handwriting of someone accustomed to writing precisely. Kai read the first line. The notes of Theopak, physician of the Third Circle of the Silent Synod. Year 1187 from the founding. He looked at Mei Jun. She was standing there, waiting. Her hands were clenched into fists. Her face was pale. She said this was her father's diary. She said her father had treated one of the Synod's high-ranking members. She said the diary contained the reason he was killed. She said she didn't understand everything because her father had written in code, but she had made out one word: founder. Kai leafed through the diary. Most of it was encrypted. Letters had been replaced with symbols. Some pages were torn out, but among the encrypted lines, there were legible notes. Fragmentary, brief. The patient had rambled in his delirium about the first city, about the tree that had grown a barrier, about the man who had planted it, about a class that wasn't listed in the tablet's registry, a class without a rank, a class that builds rather than destroys. The founder. Kai read and felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. It was about him, about his class, about the householder. A note in the margins, ink of a different color, a later edition. Theopak wrote that he had found a mention of the founder's class in the Synod's archives, that this class is not assigned by the tablets, that it comes from the guardian tree, that the last founder lived 800 years ago, and was the one who laid the foundations for the first barrier cities, that the synod cut down the tree and rewrote history, that the founder has become forbidden knowledge, that a single mention of him could get you killed. Then there was a cipher that Kai couldn't decipher. Then the last legible entry, in a different handwriting, shaky. If you're reading this, I'm dead. Find the tree. The seed in the ground is waiting. Theo Pack. Kai closed the diary. He looked at Mei Jun. She stood there, staring at him with an expression he'd seen only once in his life, when the client in Beaverton realized that Kai had found a crack in the foundation of his house that would have caused the entire building to collapse within a year. Understanding. Mei Jun understood everything. She said quietly that he was the founder. Kai didn't answer. She said that his householder class was the founder's class, that the tablet had given him a different name, but the essence was the same, that he was the one who built houses that became fortresses, that became cities, that became barriers, fortresses. Kai said he was just fixing the roof. Mei Jun looked at him and said he was the worst liar she'd ever met. Kai smirked. She was right. He asked if anyone else knew. Mei Jun shook her head. Only her. And now him. Kai hid the diary under the cornerstone in the corner of the hut. He told Mei Jun not to tell anyone, not a word, for now. She nodded. The system flashed. Mei Jun Park, Coziness 25, threshold reached, hidden map revealed, Theo Park's diary, founder class information confirmed, furnace, function unlocked, alchemy through cooking, preparation of healing dishes now available, first recipe, recovery broth, ingredients, bone broth plus nettle plus wild garlic plus salt, effect, full HP restoration, removes minor debuffs, cooking time, 3 hours, alchemy through cooking. Kai read the notification twice. A furnace that heals through food, not a spell, not a potion, soup that fully restores health. He told Mei Jun that she could now cook medicine. Mei Jun looked at the recipe and her hands began to tremble. She said that her father had dreamed his whole life of a medicine that could be given to everyone. Not an expensive elixir for the rich, not a rare herb sold for gold. Soup, hot soup made from whatever was available. For anyone. She started cooking immediately. By noon, the restorative broth was ready. Golden, thick, with a scent that made Kai's stomach growl. The first serving was given to the old man with broken ribs. He drank it. 10 minutes later, he sat up straighter. 20 minutes later, he stood up. An hour later, the fracture was healing before their eyes. The system showed, fracture, regeneration at 340% of normal. Time to full recovery, 6 hours. The old man was crying. His wife was crying. The children watched with their mouths agape. Mei Jun stood by the pot, her face looking as if she had found what she had been searching for her whole life. On the 27th day, 6 more people arrived. A family traveling the road. A merchant with a cart, his wife, children, and a laborer. The cart was broken. The wheel was shattered. They were stranded 2 hours from the hut and had heard from travelers that people here were fed and treated. Kai repaired the wheel. His diagnosis revealed a crack in the hub. He carved a new wedge from an oak log. He hammered it in. He secured it with a willow rod. The wheel was back in place. The merchant watched this with the expression of a man who couldn't believe that a ragged 17-year-old had just done a wheelwright's job in 20 minutes. The merchant offered payment, silver. Kai refused. He said he didn't need silver. He said that if the merchant wanted to help, he should spread the word along the road that the Dormer House welcomes travelers. The merchant nodded. He rode off, but he left a sack of flour and a bundle of dried meat as a token of gratitude. The system beeped. Storage room. Incoming supplies. 5 units of flour. 3 units of dried meat. House reputation plus 10. Flour. Mei Jun looked at the flour, turned to Kai, and said that if he could get some eggs, she would bake bread. Real bread. Not just flatbreads made from grains. Bread. Kai couldn't get any eggs yet, but it was only a matter of time. Level 3 of the courtyard promised to unlock animal husbandry. That would require another 15 points. They'd get them. On the 28th day, what Kai had been anxiously awaiting happened. In the evening, everyone was sitting by the fire, 20 people in and around the hut. It was impossibly cramped, but it was warm. Kai sat by the wall, mending a leaky fish basket. Lyra sat next to him. She was mending one of the children's shirts. Quiet, peaceful. Their shoulders were almost touching. Lyra looked up at him. He turned toward her. Their faces were close. She wasn't looking at him the way a 16-year-old girl looks at a boy her own age. She was looking at him the way someone looks at a person who makes them feel safe, a person they trust. Kai saw that and looked away. Because he's 34. Because she's a child. Because he sees her as a daughter, and she doesn't see him as a father. And that's a problem no system can fix. Just then there was a loud knock at the door. Kai jumped to his feet. Seora was already standing there with her sword. Lyra grabbed Hannah. Mei-jun pulled the children back toward the stove. Penny stood against the wall. There was another knock on the door. Kai opened it. A young woman stood on the threshold. She was wearing a travel cloak and carrying a bag. Her hood was pulled down over her face. Behind her lay the night and the snow. She said in an even voice that her name was Penny and that she needed a place to stay for the night. Kai looked at his Penny. Penny looked at him. The stranger pulled back her hood. No, not Penny. Someone else. Older, dark hair, a slender, calm face, eyes that didn't blink when they looked at him. The system activated. Sister Aurelia North, 24 years old. Class hidden. Rank hidden. Health 78%. Hunger 32%. Fear 0%. Affiliation the Silent Synod. Rank Inquisitor Observer. Mission assess a subject with a non-standard class. Fear 0%. Kai read that number and realized that the person before him was not a refugee, not a victim, not a lost girl. Before him stood a professional, sent to assess him. He looked into her eyes. She looked back, calmly, without threat, without fear. The way a surgeon looks at a patient before deciding whether to operate or not. Kai stepped aside. He opened the door wider. He said dinner would be ready in 10 minutes. Aurelia entered. Aurelia sat down against the wall and folded her hands in her lap. She didn't look around. She didn't survey the hut with curiosity like everyone who had come before her. She sat motionless and waited, like someone accustomed to waiting for hours. Kai set a bowl in front of her. A stew of roots with fish and salt. Mei-jun had cooked it. Aurelia looked at the bowl, then at Kai, then she picked up a spoon. She ate slowly, neatly, not a single unnecessary movement. When she finished, she set the bowl down and said it was delicious. Her voice was even, emotionless, like a report. Kai sat down across from her. Seora stood by the door with her sword, never taking her eyes off Aurelia. Mei-jun was busy at the stove, but Kai could see her clenching a knife. She had tucked the Synod amulet around her neck deeper than usual. Penny was counting something on the blackboard and pretending not to listening. Lyra led the children to the far corner. Hannah sat on the couch and looked at Aurelia with the expression of a cat facing an unfamiliar dog. Aurelia said she had come on a mission. She said that the householder class tablet had not been registered in the registry for the past 800 years. She said that the Synod tracks anomalies. She said that her task was to observe and evaluate. Nothing more. Kai asked what would happen after the assessment. Aurelia replied that it depended on what she saw. Kai nodded. He said she could stay and watch. He said he had nothing to hide. A lie, but a convincing one. Aurelia looked at him for a long time. Then she nodded. That night she slept in the corner on the floor. Not on the cot. Not by the stove. In the corner. With her bag under her head. Kai sat by the door and thought. An inquisitor of the Synod in his house. The organization that cut down the guardian tree 800 years ago. The one that rewrote history, the one that killed Mei-jun's father, and now their observer was eating his soup and sleeping on his floor. 7 days until Kasha, an inquisitor in the house, a punitive squad on the horizon. Kai did the math. The house's total point score, 147. Wall, level 5. Durability, 88. PE level 3 with alchemy. Storage room, level 3. Courtyard, level 2, with traps and a bramble wall. Hearth, level 2. 21 residents, including Aurelia. Coziness, average 7.4, but no one has a coziness of 50. The wall of oaths is closed. Kai did what he did best. He worked. Over the next 2 days, he remodeled the interior of the hut. 21 people in one room is chaos. He built an interior partition out of stone and clay. He divided the hut into 2 areas, living quarters and utility space. The living quarters were by the stove. The utility area was by the door. Then he built a shed outside, stone posts, a roof made of poles and straw. The kitchen was under the shed. June moved the pots and supplies there. The free space inside doubled. The system reacted. Home. Interior space expanded, plus 4 home points. Capacity increased by 8 residents. Aurelia watched everything. She followed Kai like a shadow. She didn't get in the way. She didn't help. She didn't comment. She just watched. On the 2nd day of her stay, she stood nearby as Kai explained to Lyra how to mix the mortar properly. He drew with charcoal on a board. Proportions: 1 to 3 to 1. Ash, clay, sand. Aurelia looked at the drawing, and for a second her face twitched. A micro-expression. Kai wouldn't have caught it if not for the diagnostic scan. Surprise, 12%. Recognition, 8%. Recognition. She recognized something in his drawing, or in his way of drawing, or in the principle itself. Kai didn't let on. He continued explaining. On the evening of the 29th, Kai did what he'd been saving his strength for over the past 2 days. He mended Aurelia's cloak. She'd left it to dry by the fire. The cloak was black, thin fabric, expensive, but torn in 3 places. Kai took the needle that June had made from a fishbone, some thread made from willow bark, and he sat down to mend it. In his past life, he hadn't known how to sew, but the system granted a bonus to any domestic skill within the house's radius. A 40% bonus to the precision of manual work. The needle glided smoothly. The stitches fell neatly. Not perfect, but neat. Aurelia returned from her rounds and saw him with the needle in his hands. She stopped. She watched for a minute. Kai finished. He handed her the cloak. She took it. She looked at the seams, then at him, then at the seams again, and said a quiet thank you. The first real word in 2 days. Not a report, not an observation. Thank you. The system flashed. Aurelia North. Comfort 4. Change plus 4. 4. From 0 to 4 in 2 days. For a woman who fears nothing and trusts no one. Kai thought that sewing, food, and warmth weren't weapons. They were what he fought with. The only weapons he had. On the 30th day, Kai got up before dawn. He checked the walls. He checked the traps. He checked the pantry. He checked the stove. Everything was ready. Wall, level 5. Durability, 88. Fire resistance, level 2. Courtyard, level 2. 3 pits, a wall of brambles, tension ropes. Pantry, level 3. 30 days worth of supplies. Stove, level 3. Alchemy through cooking. Recovery broth. 21 residents. Documents. Land deed. Hale's accounting records. Tax copies. Everything's with Penny. Everything's been tallied. Everything's ready. Kai washed up at the stream. He put on a clean shirt that Lyra had washed yesterday. He smoothed his hair. He stood up straight. His body ached, but he stood upright. The foreman at the site on the day of the inspection. Hannah shouted from the roof. "They're coming! 6 of them, on horseback!" Ahead of them, a banner bearing the Wayne House coat of arms. Kai walked out to the gate. Alone. Behind him, the hut. The house. His house. With people inside who believe the walls will hold. Penny stood by the door with a folder of papers. June was by the stove. Lyra was with the children. Hannah was on the roof. Saora was around the corner with a sword. Aurelia was in the shadows by the wall, watching. Cassius Wayne dismounted first. Tall, thin, wearing an expensive fur-trimmed doublet. His face was sharp as an axe, eyes that counted people like coins. Behind him were 5 others, 2 scribes, 3 fighters, all in light armor bearing coats of arms. Cassius looked at the hut, at the walls, at the blackberry hedge, at the smoke from the chimney, and he laughed. Loudly. He said he'd heard about the homeowner who plays at being a lord. He said it was amusing. He said he'd come to collect body number 1 on Mornhall's list, Kaya Dormer, to be loaded onto the wagon train, to the northern front. Kai bowed politely. He said he was glad to see a representative of the Empire. He said he was inviting him to dinner. Cassius stopped laughing. Dinner wasn't the word he'd expected. He'd expected please, or flight, or the silence of an empty house, not an invitation to dinner. Kai opened the door. Cassius entered with 3 fighters. 2 scribes stayed with the horses. Inside, it was warm and smelled of stew. The table was set. Mei-jun had gone all out. Fish baked in clay, salted root vegetables, porridge with dried meat, hot herbal tea. Cassius sat down. The fighters stood behind him. Kai sat across from him. Penny stood next to Kai, holding a folder. Cassius ate. He ate slowly, appraising everything. He wasn't a fool. He saw the walls. He saw the table. He saw the people moving about the hut calmly and in unison. It didn't look like a den of scum. It looked like a manor. Small, poor, but a manor. After the meal, Kai nodded to Penny. Penny placed the first document in front of Cassius. A land deed, signed by Kai's mother, certified by the imperial seal 40 years ago. The land belonged to the Dormer family, not to the Mournhall community. Cassius read it. His expression didn't change. Penny placed the second document on the table. Mournhall's tax records for the past 20 years. The original records contrasting with Headman Hale's reports. A 40% discrepancy. 20 years of theft. Cassius read it. His expression changed. Penny placed the third document on the table. A calculation. The current tax on the Dormer estate, separate from Mournhall. The amount calculated according to the imperial rate. Method of payment? Grain. 3 sacks. Penny pointed to the sacks against the wall. Cassius looked at the papers, then at the sacks, then at Kay, then back at the papers. He was the youngest son of the Wayne clan, sent to the border to make a career for himself. His task was to collect taxes and recruits, to return with a report, to show his father that he had succeeded. Before him lay proof that Mournhall had been deceiving the empire for 20 years, that the village head was a thief. That taxes had already been overpaid for 3 years in advance. That Kay's land was not under the village head's jurisdiction. If Cassius took Kay into the convoy by force, he would violate the imperial law on estates. If he accepted the documents, he would have to arrest Hale. Cassius placed the papers on the table. He looked at Kay and smiled. Not a kind smile. The smile of a man who had counted the pieces on the board and realized he didn't like the move but was forced to accept it. He said the tax had been accepted. He said the Dormer estate was registered. He said that Bailiff Hale would be arrested and sent for investigation. He stood up, turned toward the door, then turned back, and he said quietly that Kai Dormer was a smart boy. He said that smart boys don't live long on the border, and he left. Kai stood by the door and watched as Cassius mounted his horse, as his retinue turned to leave, as they rode toward Mournhall to pick up Hale. The system beeped. Deadline 1 closed. Tax paid. Dormer estate. Status registered. Reputation plus 50, plus 20 house points. And at that very moment, a symbol flashed in the sky above the village. White, bright. A symbol Kai didn't recognize, but Aurelia did. She stood by the wall and looked up. Her face went pale. For the first time ever, she said one word. Synod. The Synod's sign hung in the sky for 3 minutes and then faded. A white circle with 3 lines inside. Kai memorized it. Aurelia kept staring at the sky even after the symbol had vanished. Her hands were trembling. Not from fear. Her fear level was at 0. It was from something else. Kai walked over and asked what it meant. Aurelia replied that it was a summons. She said the Synod was requesting a report. She said she had to respond within 3 days. If she didn't, they'd come themselves. Kai asked what she would write. Aurelia looked at him for a long time, in silence. Then she said she hadn't decided yet, and she walked behind the hut. Kai didn't follow her. He knew that pressuring someone who was making a decision was the worst thing you could do. In his past life, he'd seen clients tear up contracts because the foreman hadn't given them time to think. Aurelia had to decide for herself. All he could do was give her a reason to stay. That evening, he cooked a stew. Himself. He didn't ask Mei-jun to do it. He found the roots himself. He cleaned the fish himself. He stood over the pot for 3 hours. Mei-jun stood nearby and offered her comments. She said he was cutting the burdock too coarsely. She said the fish should be added later. She said there was too much salt. Kai listened but did it his own way. Mei-jun snorted, but she didn't interfere. The stew turned out rough, manly, like food at a construction site, without Mei-jun's elegance, but hot, filling, and honest. He set the bowl in front of Aurelia. He sat down across from her. She ate. She stopped after the third spoonful. She looked into the bowl, then at Kai, then back into the bowl, and she asked for a second bowl. The system flashed. Aurelia North, coziness 8, change +4. Her first moment of weakness in 18 years. A second bowl. For someone who had lived in the synod cells since the age of 6 and had never asked for seconds, it was like Sayora stepping into a house. A small step that meant more than it seemed. Kai poured her a second bowl. Aurelia ate in silence. The children were making noise all around them. Hannah was arguing with Penny about who was better at math. Lyra was quietly singing something to one of the little ones. Mei Jun was clanging pots and pans. Saora sat by the door cleaning her sword, but her ears were listening. Just another evening, more than 20 people under one roof and right next to her. Aurelia finished eating. She set down her bowl, and for the first time, she took off her hood indoors. Her hair was dark, short. Her face looked younger without the hood, not 24, 20, maybe younger. The synod had taken her in at age 6 and put the hood on her as a uniform, a mask, and a wall between her and the world. She took it off. The system flashed. Aurelia North, comfort level 12, change +4. 12. In a single evening. Kai didn't show that he'd noticed. He just cleared away the bowls. The next 3 days were quiet. Cassius had left. Hale was arrested. The village of Mornhall was buzzing like a beehive. A new village head hadn't been appointed yet. People didn't know what to do. Some were angry at Kai, others admired him, still others were afraid. Jared had vanished. After the incident with the pants and the arrest of Hale, his patron, he disappeared from the village. Kai didn't know where.
The system didn't show people outside the house's radius, but he sensed that Jared would return, and that next time he wouldn't come alone. On the 32nd day, Kai began the expansion. 21 people in the hut was the limit. More space was needed. He started an addition, a second room. Against the west wall, stone masonry, a roof of clay-coated poles. Everyone worked. Lyra hauled stones, small ones, the ones she could lift. Hannah passed the mortar. May to June prepared the mortar and treated scrapes. Penny kept track of material usage. Even the man from Crossfield helped. He turned out to be a former carpenter, and his hands were skilled. Kai showed him how to lay stones using the dry stone masonry technique. The man watched his hands and repeated the motions. An hour later, he was laying stones just as well as Kai. The system flashed. House apprentice. Ralph from Crossfield. Stone masonry skill level 1. Class can be shared. Kai paused. He read the notification twice. Class can be shared. His skills, his techniques. He can teach others, and the system counts it. This changed everything. Kai cannot leave the house's radius. He cannot build everywhere.
But he can teach people who will go and build on their own. Apprentices, students, not just one house, a network of houses. Kai looked at his hands, then at Ralph's hands, then at the wall they were laying together, and he thought that in a past life he'd taught newbies on a construction site. Every season, new guys, green, unable to hold a trowel. Within a month, they were laying tiles more evenly than he was, because he knew how to teach, and because a good foreman isn't the one who does everything himself. It's the one who makes sure the crew can work without him. On the 35th day, the addition was ready. A second room, 6 by 4 meters, stone walls, a clay roof, 2 sleeping platforms, a window with wooden shutters, a rammed earth floor. The system beeped. House. Expansion complete. Capacity 35 residents, plus 10 house points. House level 6. 35.
It can take in 14 more. And they will come. Kai knew it. Word of the Dormer house was spreading along the roads. The merchant had told the story. Refugees from Cross Field had told the story. Every traveler who passed by and saw smoke from the chimney and heard children's laughter behind the wall passed it on.
On the 33rd day, Kai was sitting in the courtyard in the evening, sharpening a knife. Aurelia approached, without her hood. She sat down beside him. She was silent for a minute. Then she said she'd sent the report. Kai asked what she'd written. Aurelia said she'd written the truth, that the householder class posed no threat, that the carrier was engaged in domestic activities, that the recommendation was to continue surveillance. Kai looked at her. She said this while looking him in the eyes, and through the diagnostic interface, he saw a single number that spoke louder than all her words. Guilt, 14%. 14% guilt, because she had lied. The householder class posed a threat, a huge one, to everything the Synod stood for, and she knew it, and yet she wrote that it didn't. Kai didn't tell her he could see the numbers. He said thank you. Aurelia nodded. Then she said she'd be staying, for an indefinite period, to observe. Kai said she'd need her own cot. Aurelia said the floor would do. Kai said they didn't sleep on the floor in his house. Aurelia looked at him, and the corner of her mouth twitched slightly. Not a smile, a hint of a smile. A shadow of a shadow. The system flashed. Aurelia North, Comfort 18, Change +6, Hidden card. Progress 18 out of 50. 18, growing fast, faster than the others. Maybe because she's 24 and understands things faster. Maybe because she's never had a home and now, for the first time, feels what it means to have a roof that isn't government issued. On the 37th day, Kai stood in the courtyard and looked at the ground. Something wasn't right. The diagnostics showed an anomaly. Under the hut's foundation, deep down, 2 meters, an energy source, type unknown, intensity increasing. Kai crouched down. He placed his palm on the ground. He closed his eyes. The system launched a deep diagnostic scan. Object, seed, type, guardian tree, age, 800 years, status, awakening, stage 1 of 5, condition for transitioning to stage 2, comfort level of 50 for 1 resident or 20 residents with a comfort level of 25. Current progress, 0 out of 1 for the first condition, 3 out of 20 for the second. Seed, beneath his hut, beneath the foundation he had laid, stone by stone. Guardian tree, the very one Theo Pack had written about, the very one the Synod had cut down 800 years ago. Its last seed had lain here all these centuries, and waited for the founder, waiting for him. Kai withdrew his hand from the ground. He stood up. He looked at the hut, at the walls he had built, at the roof he had repaired, at the stove that feeds and heals, at the people living inside. And he realized that all this time he hadn't just been building a house. He had been awakening the tree. With every stone, with every bowl of porridge, with every night spent by the door, he had been feeding the root that had slept in the ground for 800 years. And the root had begun to awaken. Kai looked up at the sky, clear, cold, autumnal. Somewhere in the south, Cassius Wayne was writing a report to his father. Somewhere, Jared was sharpening his teeth. Somewhere in the depths of the Synod, someone was reading Aurelia's report and didn't believe a single word of it. Somewhere, Emperor Valtara was moving pieces on a map, and the border village of Mornhall was to him a speck of dust that could be brushed away with the flick of the finger. And Kai stood in the courtyard of his house and felt how, deep beneath his feet in the earth, something warm was slowly turning toward the light. He went back inside. He sat down by the stove. Lyra brought him some herbal tea, hot, bitter. He drank and watched the fire. Mei Jun sat across from him, leafing through her father's diary. She was looking for a key to the coded pages. Penny, by the wall, was tracing a chalk line on the blackboard and muttering numbers. Hannah was sleeping on the cot, curled up in a ball. Sora sat by the door with her eyes closed, but Kai knew she wasn't asleep.
Aurelia was in the corner on a new cot, staring at the ceiling. Kai didn't know what she was thinking. The diagnostic scan showed only numbers, not thoughts, but he could see that her guilt had risen to 19%. 19. She'd lied for his sake, and that weighed heavily on him. Kai finished his tea. He set down the mug. He lay down on his mat by the stove. He closed his eyes. Tomorrow he needed to expand the yard. He needed to put up a wooden gate, not just an opening in the blackberry bushes. He needed to catch some fish. He needed to teach Ralph how to lay lintels.
He needed to keep an eye on Aurelia. He needed to think about Kasia, who had promised to come. He needed to think about Jared. He needed to think about the seed beneath the foundation. He needed to think about the 20 residents of Ute 25. A lot. Too much. But he was a foreman. 3 projects at once, different crews, different deadlines, different problems. He'd managed back then, he'll manage now. He'd fallen asleep, and beneath him, 2 meters deep, the seed of the guardian tree pulsed steadily and warmly, like the house's second heart. On the 42nd day, Jared returned, not alone. Behind him came 12 mercenaries in leather armor carrying short swords and crossbows. Kana was the first to see them. She shouted from the roof and leaped down. Kai stepped out into the courtyard. He looked down the path. Jared was riding ahead on new horse. The fire on his fists burned steadily. He had changed during his 2-week absence. He'd lost weight. His eyes had grown harder. Riding beside him was a man in a black cloak. His face was hidden. The system ran a diagnostic scan at maximum range. Mercenaries. Ranks ranging from C to B. Average weaponry.
Combat experience ranging from 2 to 8 years. The man in the black cloak, class hidden, rank hidden, affiliation hidden. The only thing the system showed was a number. Danger level, 87%. 87. Kai swallowed hard. He'd never seen anything like this. Siora's danger level was 45. Cassius's was 38. Mercenaries ranged from 15 to 30. 87 was a level at which Kai could die from a single blow before he even had time to realize what had happened. Siora was already standing beside him, sword in hand. She, too, had seen the man in black, and Kai saw her fingers turn white on the hilt. She knew this type. She was a mercenary. She knew what it meant, the man in the black cloak standing next to the boy who'd hired the crossbowman. It meant someone had paid real money. Kai turned to Siora and said quietly that she didn't need to fight for him. Siora looked at him and said nothing, but she didn't leave. Jared stopped 30 paces away, beyond the line of traps. He didn't know about the traps, but he sensed something was wrong. An S-rank instinct. He shouted that he'd come to take back what belonged to the village. He said that Hale had been arrested because of Kai. He said the village was without a village head and without protection. He said that Kai would answer for this. Kai stepped outside the gate, alone, unarmed. He stood at the edge of the house's radius, 8 meters. Beyond that line, he was just an ordinary dystrophic. Within it, he had walls, a furnace, traps, and a system. He didn't cross the line. Kai said that Hale had been arrested for theft. He said the village would have a new village head. He said Jared could go home and no one would get hurt. Jared laughed, a bitter laugh, an angry one. He said he had no home. He said his stepfather drank and beat him. He said his mother cried every night. He said the only person who ever listened to him was Hale, and Kai took him away. Kai looked at the diagnostic report. Jared Dormer, loneliness, 71%, anger, 84%, fear, 62%, despair, 55%, despair, not just anger, despair. A 16-year-old kid with S-rank strength and 55% despair. Kai knew that desperate people do stupid things. He'd seen it on construction sites. The guy who hadn't slept for 3 and climbed onto the roof without a safety harness. The laborer who, after his divorce, showed up drunk and turned on the saw. Despair kills more often than anger. The person in the black cloak dismounted and walked forward, past Jared, past the mercenaries, straight toward Kay. Siora stepped forward and raised her sword. The person in black stopped, took off their hood. A woman, about 40 years old, a scarred face, one eye covered by a bandage. The system updated. Commander Greta Moore, class, executioner, Rank A. Former member of the Northern Blade Squad. Current affiliation, mercenary. Contract, elimination of the owner of the Dormer estate. Client, Cassius Wayne. Cassius, not Jared. Jared thought he'd hired the mercenaries himself. But the money came from Cassius. The boy was used as a cover. If the mercenaries kill Kay, Jared will be to blame. Not Cassius. Not the Wayne house. A 16-year-old kid who was set up as a pawn. Greta Moore looked at Ciora. Ciora looked at her. Two women with swords. One rank A, the other rank B. A 1-rank difference is a chasm. Greta smiled. She said she knew Ciora. She said she'd heard about the girl who killed her commander. She said the commander was a fool and deserved it.
But a contract is a contract. Ciora said one word.
Go. Greta shook her head. The mercenaries behind her raised their crossbows. 12 bolts were aimed at the hut, at the windows, at the door, at the people inside. Kai was counting. 12 crossbows. The wall will hold against the bolts. Strength 88. But the windows won't. The shutters are wooden. A bolt will pierce them. Inside are children. Lyra, Hannah. 20 people who believe the walls will protect them. He made his decision in half a second. He turned toward the hut and shouted, "Penny! Water on the east wall! June! Everyone away from the windows! Lyra! Get the children to the corner by the stove! Hannah! Close the shutters! Aurelia! Block the entrance!" Movement began inside the hut. Quick, coordinated, just like the team he'd trained over 40 days. Penny grabbed the buckets. June dragged the elderly to the far corner. Lyra gathered the children. Hannah slammed the shutters shut and wedged them with sticks. Aurelia stood by the door. A slender blade appeared in her hand, one Kai had never seen before. The Inquisitor knows how to do more than just observe. Greta Moore raised her hand. The mercenaries drew their bows.
Kai stood between them and his home, unarmed, unarmored, a 17-year-old skeleton in a patched shirt. And he said, quietly and evenly, in 3 words, "This is my home." Greta lowered her hand. Bolts struck the wall, into the shutters, into the door. The stone held. The shutters cracked but didn't break. The door groaned. One bolt passed through a crack in the shutter and lodged in the wall a centimeter from Lyra's head. She didn't cry out. She shielded the child with her body and didn't move. Ciora attacked. She moved faster than Kai could track. The sword whistled and the first mercenary fell, his crossbow severed. The second. The third. She wasn't killing them. She struck with the flat of the blade. She chopped through weapons. She broke arms. 4 men on the ground in 8 seconds. Greta stepped in. Her sword was black and short and moved like a snake. Ciora parried. Blades clashed. Sparks flew. Ciora took a step back. Greta pressed her advantage. Rank A versus Rank B. The difference became clear. Ciora held her ground, but every parried strike sent her reeling backward toward the wall, toward the nace of the house. Kai watched and counted the seconds. Ciora was within the radius. He activated the hearth. Level 2, mental recovery, fear removal, plus 10% to the physical stats of everyone within the radius. Ciora felt it. Her movements became sharper, faster by a fraction of a second. Enough to parry a blow that should have landed. Greta frowned. She sensed that something had changed. Kai shouted, "June, the broth, now." June was already cooking it. 3 minutes. The pot was on the fire. Recovery broth. 3 minutes that Ciora had to hold out. The bramble wall held back the rest of the mercenaries. The thorns tore at their skin and clothing. 2 had fallen into the pits. 1 was hanging from a taut rope. The traps were working. Every second a mercenary spent on the thorns was a second Ciora gained to catch her breath. Jared stood to the side. Fire blazed on his fists, but he didn't attack. He looked at the hut, at the walls that held them back. at the blackberries tearing his mercenaries apart, at the girl with the sword fighting for the guy with the householder class. And Kai could see through his diagnostics how his despair was growing. 55, 60, 67. Jared didn't understand. He couldn't understand. How
the hut was still standing, how that scum had survived, how there were people around him, how he wasn't alone. Greta struck a third time and Ciora fell to one knee. The sword was knocked from her hand. Greta raised her blade, and at that moment Aurelia stepped forward. A slender blade flashed. Greta parried but stepped back, 2 against 1. A rank B and an Inquisitor against a rank A. Greta assessed the situation. 8 mercenaries on the ground, 4 trapped, 2 opponents. The walls were intact. She looked at Kai. He was standing by the door with a mug of broth in his hand. He handed it to Ciora. Ciora drank it. The system beeped softly. Health restored. Status effects removed. Ciora stood up. She raised her sword. Greta Moore lowered hers. She said the contract wasn't worth such losses. She turned around. She shouted, "Retreat!" The mercenaries who could move got up and walked away, limping, staggering, but alive, all alive. Kai hadn't killed anyone. Greta stopped at the trail. She turned around. She looked at Kai and said he was strange. She said that next time the price would be higher, and she left. Jared stood alone. The mercenaries had left without him. The horse had bolted from the commotion. The fire on his fists had gone out. He stood in the mud, a 16-year-old boy, alone. Kai approached him. Ciora tensed. Aurelia placed her hand on her sword. Kai stopped in front of Jared. He looked at him. Jared was staring at the ground. Kai said there was hot porridge inside. Jared raised his head. His eyes were red, teary. He said Kai didn't understand. He said he hated him. He'd always hated him. Kai said he understood. He said hatred didn't stop him from eating porridge, and he turned toward the hut. Jared stood there. A minute, 2. Then he followed him. Kai sat him down at the table. Mei Jun placed a bowl in front of him, silently, without questions. Jared ate, and tears dripped into the porridge. Hana watched him from the corner, not maliciously, thoughtfully. The system flashed. Visitor, Jared Dormer. Status, temporary. Comfort level 1. Alone. The beginning. On the 45th day, Ciora took her oath. It happened in the evening, quietly, with no witnesses. Kai was repairing a crack in the south wall left over from the battle with the mercenaries when Ciora approached from behind. He turned around. She was standing there with a sword, not in her hand, on her palms, horizontally, like an offering. She said she had killed a man, her commander, 2 years ago. She said he was trafficking people, selling prisoners into slavery, selling girls. She found a cage with 3 girls in the supply train and asked him why. He replied that they were merchandise. She slit his throat that night, in the tent, while he was sleeping, not in fair combat. She said that ever since then, she's considered herself a murderer, not a protector, a murderer, that she doesn't deserve a roof over her head, that she's been sleeping outside for 2 years because a roof is for people, and she isn't a person. Kai listened. He didn't interrupt. When she fell silent, he said that the person who saved 3 girls isn't a murderer. He said the murderer is the one who sold them. Ciora shook her head. She said she'd struck a sleeping man. Kai replied that it was in a past life. He paused, corrected himself. He said his father used to say that the right thing to do doesn't cease to be right just because it's done in an unseemly way. Ciora looked at him for a long time. Then she dropped to one knee. She placed her sword against the base of the wall, and she said she swore by that wall that she would stand between it and those who came to tear it down, as long as the wall stands, as long as the house stands, as long as they let her. The system beeped. Ciora Kim, Comfort 50, jump from 34 to 50. Guardian's Oath, accepted. Wall, function unlocked. Oath barrier. The wall gains active protection. Any attack on the wall reflects 30% of the damage back to the attacker.
Wall durability plus 30 within the Guardians. Kai looked at the notification and felt a lump in his throat, not because of the numbers, but because the girl who had slept on the ground for 2 years, because she considered herself a monster, had just found a wall she could stand by. Siora stood up. She raised her sword, and for the first time ever, she stood not by the door, but by the wall. Outside, facing the forest, with her back to the house. The guardian of the walls. 3 days later, Lyra reached comfort level 25. It wasn't the result of a single event. It was an accumulation. 25 days of warmth, hot meals, peaceful sleep, the voices of people around her.
Kay's hands, which every morning tossed firewood into the stove before she woke up. That morning, Lyra approached him as he sat by the stream. She sat down beside him. She was silent. Then she said she wanted to tell him something. She said that before her mother died, she had given her a medallion. She took it out from under her bosom, small, silver, with a coat of arms. The coat of arms of House Wayne, 3 swords and a crown. Lyra said her mother had been the youngest daughter of House Wayne. She had run away from the clan at 17. She had married a simple fisherman. She changed her name. She went into hiding. She gave birth to Lyra and Hannah, and she never returned. Lyra said that Cassius Wayne was her cousin. Kai sat there, staring at the locket. The cousin of an imperial tax collector. She lives in his hut. She eats his porridge. This is either a trump card or a bomb. Most likely both. The system beeped. Lyra Vane. Coziness 25. Hidden card revealed. Connection to House Vane confirmed. Oven. Function unlocked. Healing. Any food cooked in the oven restores 20 HP. Recovery broth enhanced. Effect increased by 50%. Unlocked. Voice of the house. Lyra can summon the house's functions with her voice. The house hears her. Lyra looked at Kai. He looked at her. She asked quietly what she should do with it. Kai said nothing for now. He said that when the time came, she would know. Lyra nodded. She hid the medallion. Then she went to feed the children. On the 50th day, Kai trained 3 more people. Ralph from Crossfield was already laying walls on his own. Masonry level 3. The other 2 men among the refugees had learned how to make mortar and set buttresses. The system assigned them the status of house apprentice with a limited skill set. They couldn't see the diagnostics. They didn't earn house points, but they could build using Kai's techniques. And that was what mattered most. Kai stood and watched as Ralph laid the wall of the addition. Even, precise, just as he had taught. And he thought that if every apprentice taught 2 more people, then in a year there would be dozens of people in the borderlands who knew how to build walls capable of withstanding S-rank attacks. Not through magic, not through class, through technique, through knowledge. Knowledge that Kai had brought from a world where there was no magic, but where houses stood for centuries. On the 52nd day, Jared arrived, for the 2nd time. Not with mercenaries, alone, without a horse, on foot. Hannah saw him from the roof and shouted. Kai came out. Jared was standing at the gate. His face was battered. His lip was split open. One eye was swollen shut. Kai examined him using diagnostics. Multiple injuries. Bruised ribs. A laceration on his face. Cause of the injuries. A blunt object. A mace. His stepfather. A drunken blacksmith with a sledgehammer. He beat his own son. Probably for bringing shame on the family. For failing with the mercenaries. For not being able to burn down the hut. Jared stood there in silence. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't beg. He just stood there. Kai stepped back from the door. Mei Jun was already heating up the broth. Jared walked in. He sat down on the floor by the stove. Mei Jun treated his wounds. Silently. Professionally. The restorative broth reduced the swelling within an hour. His ribs began to heal. Jared sat by the stove and watched the fire. Hannah came over and sat down next to him. She didn't say a word. She just sat there. The system flashed. Jared Dormer. Status, temporary resident. Cozy 4. Loneliness, 58%. Change, -13. Kai looked at the numbers. His loneliness was dropping, from 71 to 58, because he was sitting by someone else's fire, and next to him sat a 15-year-old thorn in his side who had once stolen his pants. And he didn't feel lonely. Kai told D. Jared that he needed help with the east wall. He said the buttress was wobbling and he needed someone strong to hold the stone while he applied mortar. Jared looked up.
He looked at Kai. Kai waited. Jared stood up and walked over to the wall. They worked until sunset, in silence, shoulder to shoulder. Jared held 40-kilogram stones with one hand, S-rank strength. Kai filled in the joints. The buttress stood rock solid, plus 3 points for the house. By evening, the eastern wall was stronger than ever. On the 55th day, Aurelia came to Kai at night. Everyone was asleep. She sat down next to him by the door. She was silent for a long time. Then she said she needed to tell him something to tell him. She said she had lied in her report to the synod. She said she knew who he was.
She knew his class was the founder's class. She knew that beneath the hut lay the seed of the guardian tree. Kai wasn't surprised. He had been expecting this conversation. He asked how she knew. Aurelia said that in the synod's archives there were records of the last founder. She said his name was Arden North. Her last name is North. She is the direct heir to the last founder, the one whose tree was cut down 800 years ago, the one whose memory was erased from history. It was no coincidence that the synod took her away at the age of 6. They knew who she was. They kept her close by. They watched her. They waited. Because the guardian tree calls through blood, and if the seed had awakened, the first one it would have called would have been her. But it didn't call her. It called Kai, a man from another world, who died saving a child and thinking of home. 2 markers, death for another, thoughts of home. The tree had waited 1,000 years, and it found him. Aurelia said the synod had sent her to investigate. If the founder had returned, the synod would have to decide, recruit him or destroy him. There was no third option. She said her choice had been predetermined from the moment the synod placed a hood over her head at the age of 6. She was meant to be a weapon, a tool. She paused. Then she said she'd never had a home. Never. Cells, missions, roads, other people's rooms, other people's tables, strangers' lights. Not once in 24 years had anyone offered her a second plate. Not once had anyone mended her cloak. Not once had anyone told her that people didn't sleep on the floor. Kai was silent. Aurelia turned to him. Her eyes glistened in the light of the stove. She said that the senior inquisitor would arrive at dawn. His name is Varus, rank A. He received her report and didn't believe it. He's coming in person, with a detachment, and he has orders. If the founder is confirmed, burn the house, disperse the residents, deliver the bearer to the synod, alive or dead. Kai asked how many. Aurelia said 30. 30 synod fighters, not mercenaries, trained, with anti-magic gear, with siege equipment. They'll be here in 3 days. Kai did the math. The wall is level 5. Strength 88 plus 30 from Siora's Oath Barrier. Total 118 within Siora's zone. The courtyard is level 3. Traps, blackberries, pits, an alchemy furnace, recovery potion, level 4 storeroom, supplies for 40 days, 28 residents, 2 fighters, Siora and Aurelia, Jared, if he agrees, 3 apprentices, Lyra with the voice of the house, Penny with logistics, Mei June with healing, Hannah with reconnaissance, against 30 trained fighters with siege equipment. Kai closed his eyes. 3 days. 3 days to prepare for something 10 times worse than a mercenary attack. He opened his eyes and began to plan. In the morning, he gathered everyone, 28 people in the courtyard. He told them the truth. He said that in 3 days, people would come who wanted to burn down the house. He said they were stronger than anything they'd faced before. He said that anyone could leave now, and no one would judge them. Silence. A long silence. Then Ralph from Crossfield said that this house had saved his family, that he wasn't going anywhere. The old man with the healed ribs said that for the first time in 20 years, he was sleeping without pain, that he was staying. The woman with the burn said that her children were eating their fill, that she was staying. One by one, all 28 of them. No one left.
Kai looked at them, a lump in his throat. Then he exhaled and said, "Well, let's get to work then." 3 days. Day 1. The walls. Kai, Ralph, and Jared reinforced the eastern and northern sections, double masonry everywhere, buttresses every 2 meters. Jared hauled stones that no single person could lift on their own. S-rank strength put to work. He worked silently and furiously, as if every stone he lifted was an answer to something inside him. The system flashed. Wall. Overall strength 94. Wall level 5+. Day 2. The courtyard. Kai tripled the number of traps. 9 pits. There were 32 of them. In black cloaks, with silver masks. They marched in rows of 4. A horseman rode at the front. Varys. The system activated. Varys Korn, Senior Inquisitor of the Silent Synod. Class, Punishing Light. Rank, A+. Danger level, 93%. 93. Higher than Greta Moore's. Riding the second horse beside Varys was Cassius Vane. He had returned, not with the Imperial Army, with the Synod. Kai understood. Cassius had been unable to legally destroy the house. Penny's documents had stopped him. So he went to the Synod. He proposed a deal. The Synod burns down the house.
Cassius gets the land. Everyone's happy, except for those inside. Kai stood at the gate. Behind him were 28 people, children, old people, refugees, 5 girls who had become his family, a brother who had tried to kill him 3 weeks ago, and the tree beneath the foundation pulsing faster with every passing hour. Varys reined in his horse. He removed his mask, an old face, 50 years old or more, white eyes, no pupils, blind. But Kai knew that the Synod's inquisitors didn't see with their eyes. They saw essence, energy, class. Varys turned his head toward the hut, and Kai felt a wave wash over him. Cold, alien, a scan. Varys was reading the house, the walls, the stove, the people, the tree. Varys froze. Then he quietly uttered a single word. Founder. Not a question, a statement. He knew. Now he knew for certain. He turned to Aurelia, who was standing by the wall. He said she had lied. He said the Synod had only one punishment for lying: death. Aurelia didn't flinch. She said she knew. Varys nodded. He raised his hand. 32 fighters began to advance. Kai took a breath, exhaled, and began. Penny. Water on the walls. May-June. The infirmary by the furnace. The children to the basement. Hannah. Eyes. Lyra. Voice. Seora. The gate. Aurelia. Right flank. Jared. Left. Everyone moved. No questions asked. No panic. Like a team that's worked together so long that words aren't needed. The first wave of 10 fighters crossed the courtyard. Blackberries tore at their cloaks and skin. 2 fell into pits. 1 hung from a rope. 7 broke through to the wall. They struck. Special hammers, heavy ones, with runes that glowed white. Anti-magic equipment. The wall hummed. Strength 118 -22, -19, -24. 3 strikes in 10 seconds. The wall creaked. Seora stepped forward. The vowed barrier flared up. A silvery wave swept across the stones. 2 fighters with hammers were sent flying backward. 30% of the damage was reflected. They rolled across the ground, howling, but the remaining 5 pressed on. A second wave came from the east. 10 fighters. Jaw Red stood before them, fire on his fists. Fierce, hot, he struck. The first fighter was sent flying 5 meters. The second one flew 3 meters. The third dodged and slashed. Jared blocked with his forearm. Armor of fire. S-rank against trained fighters. He held his ground. Varys didn't move. He stared with blind eyes. He waited. Cassius stood behind him, his face white with fear. He hadn't expected the hut to still be standing. He'd thought the synod would cut through it like a knife through butter. But the hut was still standing. The walls were creaking, but they held. The people inside didn't run. Kai was coordinating, calmly, steadily, like a foreman on a construction site where nothing is going according to plan, but that's normal, because on a construction site, nothing ever goes according to plan. Mei Jung was bandaging the wounded.
A recovery potion for everyone. Penny was tallying the damage and shouting out the numbers. East wall, -34. South wall, -18. North wall, intact. Hannah was shouting from the roof. Third wave on the right! 5 of them! Through the rose bushes! Kai called out to Lyra. Lyra stood in the courtyard. She raised her hands, and she called out. Not a shout, just her voice, quiet and steady, like a mother calling her child home. Home. Home heard her. The blackberry bushes in the courtyard came to life. The vines shot up. The thorns doubled in length. The bushes closed in like a wall against the third wave.
5 fighters were trapped. The vines wrapped around their legs and arms. The thorns dug into the joints of their armor. They slashed with their swords, but the blackberries grew faster than they could cut. The house's voice. Lyra was breathing heavily, sweat on her forehead, but she stood her ground, and Dom stood as well. Varys raised his hand. The fighters retreated. Regrouping, Kai counted the casualties. The wall, total durability, 71. Critical, 2 more waves like that, and the southern section will collapse. Ciora was wounded. A cut on her shoulder. Mei Jun was bandaging her. Jared was unharmed but breathing heavily. The fire on his fists was dim. Aurelia stood motionless by the right wall. She hadn't joined the fight yet. She was conserving her strength. Or making a decision. Varys dismounted. He moved forward. Alone. Unarmed. He raised both hands. A white light began to gather between his palms. Class, punishing light. Rank A+. An attack that would bring down the wall with a single blow. Kai watched the energy build. The system screamed. Incoming attack. Estimated damage, 200+. Wall strength, 71. Result, complete destruction. 200. The wall won't hold.
Nothing will hold. Kai looked at the wall, at the stones he had laid one by one, every single one, with his own hands. 23 days. 200 foundation stones, dry masonry, buttresses, mortar made of ash, clay, and sand. He built this wall, and it will fall. Something shifted beneath his feet. The earth, quietly, deeply, like a heartbeat. The tree. The seed sensed a threat, and Kai sensed it in return. The system flashed. Guardian tree. Awakening, stage 1 of 5. Emergency activation available. Condition, comfort 50 for both guardians. Current, Ciora 50, Lyra 42. Insufficient. Lyra 42. 50 required. 8 units. Kai looked at Lyra. She was standing in the courtyard. Her hands were raised. The voice of the house was holding the blackberry. She was trembling with tension. Sweat was streaming down her face, but she stood there, because behind her were the children, and her sister, and the people she fed every day, and the home that had given her her first night without nightmares. Kai walked over to her. He stood beside her. Lyra turned her head. Her eyes were huge, frightened, but not broken. Kai said quietly, "Your home, Lyra. This is your home." 3 words, but Lyra heard everything in them. Every evening by the fire, every bowl of porridge, every morning when the stove was already burning before she even opened her eyes, every stone he'd laid in the wall to keep her warm and safe. Lyra closed her eyes, opened them, and said one word: home. The system exploded with notifications. Lyra Van, coziness 50. Threshold reached. Voice of home, full activation. Keeper of the hearth, status assigned.
Guardian tree. Condition fulfilled. 2 guardians with coziness 50. Stage 2. Awakening. Morning dawned quietly. The snow had stopped. The sky above the dormer house was clear and cold. The tree stood in the middle of the courtyard, 3 meters tall, a thick trunk, green leaves, the first in this land in 800 years. The roots extended into the walls, the foundation, and the ground. Everything was connected. The house, the tree, and the people inside. A single organism. Varys retreated during the night. 32 fighters left, 12 wounded, 4 seriously. Cassius Wayne left first, without looking back. Kai stood at the gate and watched them leave. He didn't chase after them. He didn't shout after them. He just watched.
When the last black cloak disappeared behind the trees, he turned toward the house. The walls still stood, stones intertwined with roots. Every crack from yesterday's battle had healed overnight. Durability 150. A living wall that grew and healed on its own. The system issued its final report. House Dormer, Level 10. Status, Mini Fortress. Guardian Tree, Stage 2 of 5. Guardians, 2. Seora Kim, Guardian of the Walls. Lyra Van, Guardian of the Hearth. Residents, 30. House points, 247. Reputation, 340. Kai closed the notification. He went inside. People were waking up, slowly, wearily. Yesterday's battle had left its mark on everyone. Bruises, scrapes, fear in their eyes. But they were alive, all 30 of them. Mei Jun was already standing by the pot. She was the first to get up, as always. Morning porridge, thick, with salt, with dried meat, with wild carrots. The smell filled the hut and told everyone who was waking up one thing. Morning. We're here. We're alive. Kai sat by the wall and watched as people went out into the yard. As they stopped in front of the tree, as they touched the bark, as they looked up and saw green leaves in the middle of November. The children ran up first. The girl who had been crying over her soup touched the trunk and laughed. She said the tree was warm. It was warm. Kai could feel it. The tree radiated warmth. Quiet, steady, like a stove, like a hearth, like a home. Ralph walked over to Kai and said he wanted to keep building. He said he needed more technicians. Kai nodded. He said he'd teach him. He said there was still a lot more to do. Crossbeams, arches, drainage, sewer system, ventilation. Ralph didn't know half of those words, but he wanted to learn. And that was what mattered most. On the 60th day, Kai went out into the courtyard in the morning. People were sleeping all around him, huddled together. Refugees, apprentices, children. Seora by the wall with a sword on her lap. Aurelia in the corner on a cot. Her face was calm, without her hood. Lyra by the stove. Hannah curled up nearby. Mei Jun by the chamber pot. Penny with her slate and charcoal, even in her sleep. Jared on the floor by the door, where Kai used to sleep. 30 people under a roof that 2 months ago had been a hole in the ceiling. Kai stood and watched. The tree behind him was shedding its leaves, green against the white snow. Soot from yesterday's torches ran down the walls, but the stones were intact. White smoke rose from the chimney. Mei Jun was the first to get up and was cooking porridge, as always.
Kai walked over to the tree. He placed his palm on the bark. Warm, alive, pulsing. He closed his eyes, and he felt them. All of them. Every single one. 30 hearts under his roof. 30 people who ate his porridge and slept by his stove and believed the walls would hold. He felt Lyra, warmth, steady, like the flame in the stove. He felt Hana, bright, prickly, like blackberries in the yard. He felt Mei-Jun, sharp, hot, like boiling broth. He felt Se-Ra, cold, hard, like a stone in the wall. He felt Penny, precise, clear, like numbers on a blackboard. He sensed Aurelia, deep, quiet, like a root beneath the foundation. He sensed Jared, hot, confused, like a fire that hadn't been fed. He opened his eyes, removed his hand, and he said quietly to himself, "I've fixed the roof." The system chimed. Dormer Estate, established. Guardians, 2. Residents, 30. Status, Empire's target number 1. Kai read the last line and smirked. Empire's target number 1. 2 months ago, he was scum with a rag and a broom.
Number 1 on the death list, and now number 1 on another list, the one where they either want to buy him out or destroy him. Hana ran into the courtyard. Her face was red, her eyes were burning. She shouted that there was something on the road. Kai climbed onto the roof. He looked. On the horizon, far away, a banner, a large one, on a tall pole, colors he'd never seen before, gold and black. Aurelia climbed up after him. She looked, and turned pale, for the second time ever. She said it was Emperor Valtara's standard, his personal one, not a collector's, not an inquisitor's, the Emperor's. Kai looked at the banner, then at Aurelia, then at the house below, then back at the banner. Aurelia turned to him. Her face was serious. She said she needed to tell him something. Something about who he was, something about the tree, something about what happened 800 years ago, and why the Synod fears the founders more than monsters, wars, and emperors. She said that the first founder didn't just build cities, barriers. He built a system, a network of houses connected by trees. Each house is a node. Each tree is a root. Together, they formed a barrier that enclosed all of Ordine. Not just one city, the entire world. The Synod cut down the tree not because the founder was dangerous, but because the founder was no longer needed. As long as the founder exists, people build for themselves. They defend themselves. No Synod is needed. No empire is needed. No taxes are needed. No supply trains are needed. No death lists are needed. No one is needed except people and their houses. Kai listened. The wind whipped snow across the roof. The Emperor's banner was drawing near. The tree in the courtyard swayed. He said he understood. Aurelia asked what he would do. Kai looked down. Mei-Jun was serving porridge. Lyra was handing out bowls. Hannah was carrying water. Penny was counting. Siora was standing by the wall. Jared was carrying firewood. Ralph was stacking stones. 30 people were doing what people do every morning in every home, in every world. They were living. Kai answered Aurelia. He said he would build another house, then another, and another, as many as needed, until every outcast and every boy beaten with a sledgehammer has a roof over their head, a bowl of hot porridge, and a wall that will hold. Aurelia looked at him, and for the first time in the 24 years of her life, she smiled. Not a shadow of a smile, not a hint, a smile, a real one, a warm one, like a fire in a stove she'd never had before she came here. The system flashed. Aurelia North. Coziness, 50. Guardian. Status, available. Hidden card, fully revealed. Aurelia North. Direct heir to Arden North. The last founder. Connection to the Tree Keeper. Active. Tree Keeper.
Stage 3 of 5. Condition for Stage 4, second fortress home. They climbed down from the roof. Kai approached the tree. The tree swayed a branch, and a fruit fell from the branch. Small, round, glowing. An acorn. Kai picked it up. Warm, pulsating, alive. Something was flickering inside the acorn. He held it up to his eyes and saw. Inside the acorn was an eye, alive, green, with a golden pupil. The eye opened and looked at Kai, straight at him, into him, through him. And Kai heard it, not with his ears, somewhere deeper. A voice, old, warm, like the creak of a load-bearing beam that had held up the roof for 1,000 years. The voice said one word: home. Kai stood in the courtyard with an acorn in his hand. Around him were his people, his walls, his tree.
On the horizon, the Emperor's army was advancing. In Penny's pocket lay the documents for the trade route. In Mei Jun's bag, an encrypted diary. Around Lyra's neck, the Wayne House medallion. At Siora's belt, a sword sworn to the wall. In Aurelia's mind, the secrets of the Synod. On Jared's fists was a fire that, for the first time, burned not from anger, but from something else. And in Kai's palm was the seed of a new tree, the second, for the second house. He clenched the acorn in his fist. He turned toward the house. 28 faces looked at him from the courtyard. 30, including Siora and Aurelia. 30 people who, 2 months ago, had been nobodies, scum, refugees, orphans, beaten, abandoned, sold, and now they were residents, guardians, people who had a home. Kai tucked the acorn into his shirt. He walked over to the stove. He poured himself some porridge, sat down on a rock, and began to eat breakfast, because there was a lot of work ahead. New walls, new stones, new people who would come to the door and knock softly and timidly, like someone who's afraid the door will be opened, and someone who's afraid it won't be, and he would open it, to everyone.
Just as he'd opened it to Lyra on that first night, when the hut smelled of mice and the roof glowed with holes. Mei Jun sat down beside him. She set a second serving in front of him. She said he hadn't finished his meal again. Kai looked at her. She looked back at him, sternly, as always. But in the corners of her eyes was the warmth that had appeared that night when she saw him stroking the head of a crying little girl. He took the second serving. He ate. The porridge was hot and salty and thick, the best porridge in both of his lives. The snow was falling again, white and silent. The leaves of the tree caught the snowflakes and didn't, green against white. Life in the midst of winter. Kai finished eating. He set down the bowl. He stood up. He looked at the east wall. The third buttress had become slightly loose after yesterday's battle. It needed to be patched up. He took the pot of mortar and walked over to the wall. Because a foreman doesn't sit around doing nothing. Because the wall won't fix itself, even with the tree's roots. Because a house isn't a place. A house is what you do every day. Every stone, every bowl, every repaired roof, for a specific person.
Not a thing at all. The system flickered one last time, quietly, like a period at the end of a sentence. The Dormer House, Day 60. The walls stand.